You're listening to the Joel Martin Mastery Podcast, home of the 2-hour deep dive interview with gold, platinum, and multi-platinum bands, including Stained, Blue Rodeo, The Arkells, Finger 11, Big Wreck, Moist, Bedouin Soundclash, I Mother Earth, Ill Scarlet, Neverending White Lights, Thornley, and many more. Please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast, as well as share, comment, and like. Now let's dive in to today's episode. Welcome, everyone, to today's episode of the podcast. Thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. We are joined by a very special guest. He's achieved a level of mastery as a member of the platinum-selling and 4-time Juno Award-winning band, the Sheepdogs. He's also a member of the duo Bros, and if that's not enough, earlier this year, he released his debut solo album. So welcome to the podcast, Shamus Currie. Shamus, how are you? And is it true you released a card game that is based on your concept album to further explore the lore there?
I'm good. And yes, that is true. I had an idea to do like a merch item that was a trading card game. It was a very nerdy idea, but I finally pulled the trigger on it and went for it. And it's pretty fun, I gotta tell you.
That's amazing. So I used to play Magic the Gathering when I was a kid. It was my favorite thing in the world. I don't know how I grew out of it or why I'm not still playing, but I probably should be. I believe that I saw that it's someone that had experience with the company. I think it's Wizards of the Coast that worked on Magic the Gathering. Is there truth to all that?
Yeah, he's my partner's stepbrother. He used to work for Wizards of the Coast. And I think he traveled for like Magic tournaments as some kind of like rule keeper or something like that. But he's got a real like math background and a real strong head for coming up with the kind of like, I don't know, the nuts and bolts of the game, which is great. So he actually approached me with like, hey, if you can come up with this sort of like, you know, creative intel or the sort of the lore of this game and populate it with like the background of your album, I can create you this game. And I was like, yes, absolutely. If you can do all the hard work, I can do the easy part.
That's amazing. So was it more that he came up with like the rule set of how the game works, or is it the artwork, or is someone else that did the amazing artwork?
He basically came up with the framework of how the game worked and like the math behind it. Like, you know, you play this card at this time and it gives you this many points and blah, 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 and all that, which is great because I don't have the like math background to come up with like a game that's challenging and works on all those levels. But I was able to come up with, you know, sticking song titles and coming up with fantasy characters and like what the cards should be called and kind of that kind of stuff and the various factions of the game. Like, you know, the stuff that I would have done as like a 12-year-old nerd making my own games anyway. And then I called up Matt Dunlap, who does all the artwork for the Sheepdogs. He did all these posters and does all the album covers and stuff. And he did the artwork for my record. And he was experimenting with using AI as sort of like a quick and dirty way to get, you know, good artwork. But the idea of it being like a fantasy concept record and very like, you know, trippy and you know, bizarre, I think really like the AI art with all of its like limitations actually kind of lent itself well to creating like weird distorted images. And so he was really good at like feeding the prompts into the AI to create these kind of like cool things that were very like reminiscent of like, you know, 70s, you know, Led Zeppelin album covers and that kind of stuff. And then he just like went with it and created all these great images. And it was a lot cheaper than hiring an art team to draw, you know, 50 custom images. I can tell you that much.
That's true. I hear that the kind of the secret to happiness is cultivating that childlike wonder. And I feel like you developing that game and being a part of creating the rules and the artwork and everything, I feel like you're able to kind of be a child again for those moments.
Absolutely. Yeah. You tap into nostalgia, which is a great way to keep you working on a project, you know, hours and hours and hours. But, you know, what do they say? Make it fun. And then you never work a day in your life. Right. So that was the goal.
Absolutely. So we are going to do a full 2-hour deep dive. We're going to cover your life, your career, your discography. There's so much to talk about between, you know, the Sheepdogs have so much music and so many albums, and then Bros, there's a couple albums and some EPs and some singles, and then the new album. I really want to sink my teeth into the album because it's a great one. There's so much to talk about, and I like to start these interviews by sharing with the listeners how the guests and I know each other. Just showing the importance of networking, of building community, of fostering relationships. So in our case, back in February, around when you released your debut album, I had your bandmate Ricky Paquette of the Sheepdogs on the podcast, and while I was promoting that, we kind of ended up in the same orbit as you were, seeing this or that from the interview, and we talked a little bit, and you were kind enough to actually provide quotes for a couple episodes of the podcast. So I had Lowell Campbell, who's the drummer for my favorite band, Winter Sleep, and he's been on tour drumming with Billy Talent for the last couple of years, which is amazing. So you provided a quote for that. And then recently, there's a series on the podcast here called My Five Favorite Albums. So I get guests that come on and they share their five favorite albums of all time. And a band called the Dreamboats, who are an amazing band from the GTA that have been in California for a few years. One of their five favorite albums of all time was the Sheepdogs Learn and Burn. And you were and you were kind enough to provide kind of some behind the scenes info of the writing and recording of that album. So that is how we connected earlier this year. And I guess I want to start by just saying thank you for providing those quotes and that insight to make the podcast better,
Oh, my pleasure, man. I'm filled with little sound bites if you if you want them,
I'll keep reaching out. So we're going to work our way through your discography here, but let's go back all the way to the beginning. Where does this love of music come from? Is there an earliest musical memory when you think back?
Well, I mean, it was in our household growing up. Like my old man was a musician, so he was a professional, musician. That's how he made his living. And so it was always around. Me and my brother both took piano lessons growing up, and I played trombone in the school band. And it was always just sort of like a thing that we did, just like kind of like a generic activity. And at a younger age, I wouldn't say it was anything that I loved per se, so much as it was just like one of any number of activities that I did. Like I played baseball and I, was in the school play and I played trombone and piano and stuff. And then it wasn't until I got older that I realized that this thing that I kind of took for granted and I'd always kind of done, that I actually had some aptitude at it, and like people appreciated that I was good at this thing. And I sort of started to take it a little more seriously. I was like, oh, hey, this thing that I just kind of do, I'm actually pretty good at. And then I think, yeah, it would have been after high school when I first started forming bands and playing in bars. That I was like, hey, this is a lot of fun. This is something I kind of want to pursue. So just
So
sort of
you,
like grew organically, I guess. Yeah.
so you started with piano and trombone, and it was later on that you started with the guitar and more of the
Yeah.
singing and songwriting?
Yes. Piano. And then I took piano lessons and kind of faded away for a few years and then came back to it in my teen years as like oh, this is a cool kind of form of expression kind of thing. We always had a family piano kicking around. Trombone was something I just did in school as like an easy credit. But then again, I was like, oh, hey, you don't actually have to play boring school pieces. You can play funk music or, I played in the school jazz band, which I always liked. And then, yeah, guitar, like my older brother was always just leaving his guitar around. Like I would have to like move it off the couch if I wanted to sit down and watch TV. And then next thing you know, you'd pluck a few chords and
One
he'd play.
day when you moved it, you strummed a chord and
Yeah. What
that's
is
all
that?
she wrote.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You wrote your first
The Hard
song like
Day's
that.
Night chord by accident. Yeah.
Yeah. Which musicians would you say were your biggest influences when you first started picking up those instruments? When you looked and there were people at the peak of their power and you said, wow, if I actually dedicated myself to this, if I, really practice, that is the pinnacle of what is possible as a musician.
Well, it's funny because I kind of compartmentalize my musical growth in a few different ways. There's like the singer-songwriter side of it, which is the like strumming guitar, writing songs, trying to impress girls kind of side. But then there's also like, I was an instrumentalist playing trombone in the band, and from that side, I got into jazz and I got into like blues and R&B and that kind of thing. So I would say as far as playing guitar and like writing songs, it all kind of stems from trying to be like the Beatles, which is, kind of like they were the first modern band. They were the first group of guys who wrote and performed their own songs and were super into songcraft and singing their own songs and, coming up with cool melodies and how they fit in with the chords. And, if you're hacking your way through stuff on acoustic guitar, I think they're kind of like the Bible of that style of, songwriting. especially McCartney. I always was a McCartney guy, so very much like that. And then when I started my first ever band after high school, it was a funk band. So the guys that we were trying to sound like were like James Brown and Parliament, and I played trombone, so I really wanted to be like Fred Wesley, who was James Brown's trombone player, who was like the side man who wrote, Pass the Peas and Mo Peas and what's the other one I really like? Anyway, but his style of like really brash, aggressive trombone playing that was just like electrifying to me, and not like anything I'd ever heard, like playing in school, where they're just trying to get you to play smoothly and in a section and kind of fit in. And then Fred Wesley comes in and he's playing this like amazing funky lead playing. I was like, yeah, that's what I wanted to sound like. Of course, it's funny because I was like a skinny white kid from suburban Saskatchewan, pretty far removed from like the funky soul of the American South. But that's was sort of like a big influence on me. And then yeah, that and the classic songwriting of the Beatles.
I feel like the Apple documentary, I think it was called Get Back on the Beatles.
Yeah,
I feel like that was made for you, where it's like, I don't know, 4 hours or 6 hours or 8 hours of just right in the studio showing that these are real people. Like, yes, they're these rock stars, but these are four musicians trying to write a great album. Did you watch that? I feel like that's got your
yeah.
name written
I
all
watched it
over it.
with rapt attention. It was amazing. It was like the level of access was just unbelievable. The thing I actually took away the most from that was just how much the Beatles were just like four bratty dudes hanging out,
Yeah.
like like John Lennon just wasted time goofing around and like how much time they spent dicking around with Don't Let Me Down stuff. But it kind of like it really spoke to me as a guy who's done a lot of that same kind of behavior in a studio and stuff like that. But like to think that these were the four guys at the apex of their powers, so much money behind them, and they're still just behaving like bratty teenagers. I was like, that makes me feel better.
Yeah, I guess what was eye-opening for me is just how young they were. You
Yeah,
think of like Paul McCartney now ish, but you think back then, it's like they're already the biggest band in the world, and they're just these young guys. Like they're way younger than I am now, and that's kind of shocking.
I know. I think retroactively we kind of like put a lot of read into their personalities in ways that maybe wasn't there at the time, just because everyone's elevated them to the level of giants and in the music industry. So yeah, it is pretty amazing to go back and watch and just see 27-year-old guys goofing around. Like, I don't know. It's, yeah, humanizing, I guess. That's kind of nice.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you started learning some instruments young, but it was a little bit later on that you started taking it seriously as a musician. Before you started taking it seriously as a musician, if I asked you as a kid what you wanted to be when you grew up, what would you say?
I probably would have given you some kind of like flippant answer without actually thinking about what it meant. Like I remember my stock answer for when like the guidance counselor in school would ask you what do you want to be was an engineer, and
For
I don't
what?
I don't know. I think I think I just like said that as like a thing. I don't know. I was an active kid. Like I played sports and I was in drama and stuff like that. But I definitely like enjoyed the kind of creative pursuits more. Like I liked creative writing and stuff too. So I mean, if you like had like if you really hard pressed me, I'd probably say like I would have wanted to be like an actor or something like that. But even I think even at the time, I would have probably known that that was a bit far fetched. Like I never would have in my wildest dreams said like rock musician because that would have been far too fanciful and unrealistic. And yet, you know, through the crazy twists and turns of life, I've managed to get something like that.
Is there still a part of you that desires to be an actor?
Not really. I don't think so. Like I've seen kind of like I've had friends who work professionally as actors, and I've seen kind of like what it's like, and it seems very demanding, and also a skill set that I don't think really comes naturally to me. I think being living in a small community like Saskatoon and like acting in like high school plays, you feel like you've really got a good command on the art form. But then like living in Toronto the past 10 years, I've met all these people, professional actors, and they're so much more committed to their craft and quick-witted and like adaptable than I ever was. And I was like, no, I think I'm better off being a musician.
Do you think with all the music videos that you've made over the years that that's kind of um it kind of scratches the itch a little bit that you're, in front of the cameras and there's some
Yeah.
acting perhaps.
Well, I mean, stepping on stage is like acting. Like it's a performance every night. You're putting on a persona to the crowd, and some of it I think is based on who you are as a person. But I think, anyone who performs will tell you that they're kind of amplifying themselves to be on stage. Like it's a act. It's a bit of a show, so I get to act every night if you can think of it that way, like I think, it just so falls in the same category as just performing, as being on, as being, a larger than life version of yourself for 90 minutes while you're on stage every night.
Yeah, some people it's actually a character that they're playing on stage.
Yeah,
Like when you get someone like the Alice Cooper, it's like they
totally.
they step on stage and it's no longer the regular person. It's this Alice Cooper persona. And
I like Bowie. Yeah.
one example that stood out to me is I saw Danko Jones at Barrymore's here in Ottawa, so pretty intimate venue, and on stage it's like total rock star, right? It's like the tongue out and
Yeah.
just this energy and this badass dude. And then backstage, he's walking around, he's got glasses on and he's like super timid. I was like, oh my
Super mean.
God. Like he
Yeah.
left, he left this other character on stage completely. It was almost shocking.
Yeah. Well, I think, is it in that Get Back documentary where Paul McCartney's talking about meeting Little Richard and he comes in backstage and he's very meek and he's got like a fur jacket around him. He's like all huddled from the cold. And then he like gets a hot towel in the sink and wraps around his face and then comes up and he's like, "Good morning, darlings." And he's like totally in character and he's ready to go. And he's got the like crazy attitude and everything. Like, I don't know. I kind of love that. Like, I like the compartmentalizing, the stage persona, and then you can just be whoever you want to be in your regular life. Like, I don't know. I kind of like that.
Yeah. If so, I'm in Ottawa. I grew up in Ottawa. You grew up in Saskatoon. If we were friends at 16 and you invited me over to your place to play some music for me, what albums would you be spinning at 16?
Well, there'd definitely be a bunch of James Brown in there. So that's when I was like super into funk music as a dorky white kid. I was just like obsessed with it. So I liked all the classic 70s funk. So it would have been James Brown, would have been some Parliament, probably would have been like some of the Spinners in there. Um, I mean, I liked the sort of Canadiana rock at that time too. So, I was listening to Sloan, and I might have had, if I was trying to be really cool, I might have had like a Thrush Hermit CD in there or something like that. um, yeah, I don't know. Rating my older brother's CD collection was a big source of what I was listening to at the time, and he had very eclectic tastes, which was great. So I mean, I kind of got to do a little bit of everything. But my dad also had a lot of like Stevie Wonder, Elton John, Motown kind of stuff kicking around too. I know Elton John's on Motown, but um, so yeah, it definitely diverse, eclectic kind of stuff. Lots of jazz too. Like I used to listen to my grandfather's like big band stuff, like Benny Goodman and Glenn Miller and that kind of stuff. And as a trombone player, I like that kind of stuff. So I mean, and that's kind of where the bros shtick comes from, is that we had this eclectic taste in music and we kind of liked, like everyone knows us as like rock and rollers, but we like all kinds of stuff, and that's kind of where that kind of idea came from. But I think my main thing when I was 16 was I was just like all about the funk music. James Brown all the time, Parliament, Fred Wesley, those guys. That was like kind of my jam.
You mentioned Sloan. I saw Sloan at Edgefest in Toronto years ago, where it was like Eve Six, I Mother Earth, Our Lady Peace. It was like this awesome, I don't know, quadruple bill. Then I saw them recently here in Ottawa, and not too long ago, I got a call from a friend that said, "Hey, tonight, the singer from Sloan, Chris Murphy, is doing a solo acoustic show. Do you want to
Yeah,
join us? We have an extra ticket." So I went out to the Rainbow Bistro, which is this little venue in Ottawa, and he was performing. And it was, the best part is he was telling all these stories in between. He's a great storyteller. And my favorite part is when it's done, he goes, "Okay, so here's I'm done for the night, the encore, whatever." And there's no backstage and there's like no off stage. So he's there. He's like, "All right, have a good night." And he just turns around. So he turns around and then people start cheering and cheering. And then he goes, "All right, encore." Like he pretended he got off stage. That was the
yeah,
best part.
genius. He's such a goof, that guy, man. So
Yeah.
Sloan was actually my first ever rock show.
No way.
I saw them at Louis in Saskatoon, which is a campus bar when I was 15, I think. Oh, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, man, they have so many good songs. And what's awesome is like all the members of the band can play every instrument, they can all sing. And
Yeah.
because of that, you get so many different sounding songs within that band. So you have some of the more punk stuff, the more pop stuff, the more rock, and then you have beautiful songs like The Other Man that sounds completely different. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
they're one
love
of
the
the
idea that they all wrote and they all sang too. Like I think that was a big influence, on a band like, Sheepdogs and stuff. Like the idea that every member can sing and everybody has their own voice. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, they're as far as I was concerned growing up, they were like Canadian rock royalty. They were like, one of my all-time faves.
yeah, they were saying that besides the Rolling Stones, Sloan is the longest running band of all time that still has the original members. Like they got big in like, I don't know, 92 or something. And
Yeah.
it's still
Yeah.
the same four guys. And apparently outside of them, it's like the Rolling Stones that have had the same members. And after that, it's Sloan that still, I don't know, 30 whatever years later are still the same four guys. So that's their
That's
claim.
wild.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
Good for
Anyways, just,
them.
just drop in some random knowledge that nobody
Yeah.
cares about. What? So our listeners love to hear about crappy jobs, regular people jobs that these successful musicians had before their big breaks. They want to know that you are like a real person that has struggled. Uh, can you share any of the jobs that you had before, let's say, the Sheepdogs took off?
Sure. Well, my first ever gig was I was a grocery store clerk at a Sobeys in Saskatoon. That sucked. And then I actually got a pretty good job after that with a little bit of nepotism. My mom was a librarian at the University of Saskatchewan. She got me a gig as a bookshelver, which would just meant that I would go and put books back on the stacks. It was like a five-story library, and I was responsible for the I think it was the like natural sciences section. So I was putting like books that were pretty boring to me back. But the best part was is that I got to just listen to music for 3 hours a day while I was shelving books. And there was a photography department too. So like if I got all my books done early, I could go and just like look at these weird books of photography and just listen to tunes. That was the best part. And then I also worked as a short order cook at a pub for a while in Saskatoon. And then I worked at a CD store as well, which is actually pretty sweet because you just, be around music all the time. And, in my mind, I was just like recreating scenes from High Fidelity constantly, but it wasn't that much fun. It was,
Did
yeah.
people ever come in and ask you about music to try to get you to figure out what song or album or band they had heard? Would that happen?
Yes. Yes. And I was not a listener of the radio at that point in my life. And so I was mostly hopeless because I knew a lot about like 70s music and like I knew about the music that I liked and I had a rude awakening that that was not necessarily what was popular or mainstream or what people wanted to buy at this CD store that I was at. So people would come in and be like humming a song or like, that song about like the new tattoo that's on the radio? And I'd be like, can't help you, buddy. I don't know. He releases is over there, but
I worked at CD Warehouse in Ottawa as a teenager, and a couple came in and they said, "Oh, we're looking for a Blue Rodeo song. It's a slow one." I was like, "Well, that goes from 400 Blue Rodeo songs to 398. Like that doesn't
yeah.
really." So anyways, that's a random
Totally.
memory that I have. How early on did you know you had something special to offer as a musician, and that maybe you could do this as a career? You said it took other people kind of commenting on your talent first for you to know that you had something going on there.
Well, I think I always knew that I could play. Like when I was at the University of Saskatchewan, I played in the big band, which is kind of hilarious. I was like I was studying English literature at the time, so I was not a music student, but I played a bit of trombone and I was like a pretty good soloist. So my like the leader of the big band kind of like poached me and brought me to play. And like I couldn't read the charts as well because I wasn't like studying music very avidly at the time. But he would always like throw me a solo and I could like play a pretty good solo. So like I kind of always knew that like I had a good sort of musical pedigree on the back burner. And then I was playing in bands and stuff around then, like of my own bands, playing like original music. And some of my band members started saying that they wanted to study music and move to Toronto. And they kind of kept all moving away. And the band shrunk from like a six-piece funk band down to like a three-piece rock band. And I went from playing trombone to playing bass and singing lead. And then eventually we kind of like we just sort of kept shrinking and people kept splintering off and moving away. But all my buddies were going to Toronto to study music and they were taking it way more seriously. So I think it was always like I knew that I had something to offer, but it took kind of my pals moving away and taking it more seriously for me to realize like, hey, like if I want to do this and take it seriously, I have to like commit and sort of make it my full-time passion kind of thing. And so I guess in 2009, that's when I moved to Toronto to study at Humber College. And I was studying jazz trombone, which seems like hilariously archaic now because I don't really play jazz or anything like that. But that was the program that had been recommended to me and that all my buddies were going to. So I decided to follow suit. But it meant, coming to the big city and just like a change of mindset that I was going to start taking music seriously as a profession and just applying discipline to it instead of just like, hey, this is a fun thing to do to impress girls and like to get into bars and stuff like that. I was like, oh, no, I'm going to work at this. I'm going to start, practicing and, writing songs and working on music with like a discipline that normally I hadn't really applied to maybe anything in my life after that point. But
You got sucked into the concrete jungle and it hasn't spit you
yeah,
out then.
yeah, pretty much, man. I think, not to get too scholastic with it, but when I came to Toronto and I came to study at Humber, it was a real like culture shock for me. Like I wouldn't say a country kid, but I was a city kid from a very small city in a very rural province. So like, moving to Toronto was very different for me. And then also coming to a music school, I was a bit older. I would have been 20 already, and I had like a just sort of general arts background. And everybody in my program was a few years younger than me and way better at their instrument than me. There were all these kids who had gone to like arts high schools who could just play circles around me, like classical trumpet and just like amazing, amazing musicians. But I found that maybe I had them beat on like life experience. Like I was older, but also like I had played in bands before. I had written songs. I could play a few different instruments. So maybe I couldn't stand up to them in just like pure instrument virtuosity, but I had versatility. I could do other things, and I think that became useful later when I joined the Sheepdogs because I became like the gadget man. I became the guy who could do a bunch of things, the jack of all trades. So that was kind of a good
I uh
skill to have.
I know I have a lot of friends that went to that school and they're all
Oh
like
yeah,
ridiculous world-class musicians. So I know what you're talking about.
there was some like yeah, and still are like there's guys I know who were like went on to go study at Berkeley or like got these international teaching positions and stuff. Like there's some real heavy hitters for sure. But equally tragic are the crazy good musicians who I know who kind of hung it up because it's such a competitive industry to get into. And I know these guys who are working as coders now or like, back in Saskatoon working for the city of Saskatoon cutting grass who are like world-class musicians and stuff. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's what's funny is when you were saying your band kept shrinking, that you started as a six piece and you went down to a three piece. And I'm picturing at the end, it's just you as a one man band with
Yeah.
like playing bass. There's like a trombone on a stand. You got like a hat that you can move sideways with a string, and then
That
you're
high
playing
hat
kick
in
with
my
your
knee.
foot.
Yeah.
What are some of the names of the bands that you had before joining the Sheepdogs? Our listeners love hearing these crazy names. Sometimes they're like the worst names ever. Sometimes they're like genius names that are better than the band they made it big with.
Well, my first ever band was pretty bad. We were called Keepers of the Groove. We were a funk band, but
That's good.
it was like a reference to like in the Rain song, Robert Plant says something about Keepers of the Groove, but like he actually says Keepers of the Gloom, but we like misheard him. We're like, oh, that would be a sick band name. Uh, but yeah, I don't know. It just sort of felt very cumbersome and kind of nerdy for a band name.
Yeah,
And then when basically like our horn section left, or like I was part of the horn section, but I switched to bass, and our sax player moved on, and we changed to sort of become just like a power trio, and then we were called the Proof for a while, which
that's
was
good.
not a great band. Well, thank you. And then And then we were just called the Keepers Trio, I think, for a while. None of these bands ever did anything. I think we maybe just played a few bars in Saskatoon, and that was about it. I think the Keepers of the Groove biggest gig ever was a New Year's Eve show where we opened for the Sheepdogs, in probably 2007 or something like that. But that was fun. And then, yeah, I don't know. I played in a ska band, as every trombonist does as a rite of passage, very briefly. Guys that I just knew from like another high school who needed another horn player. So I sort of moonlit in that band for a while. I think they were called Schnarp or something like that, just like a nonsense name. That's all I got. I don't
I
know.
love how the guy that released a card game said that the name was too nerdy. The band name
Yeah.
was too
Hey,
nerdy.
I'm very aware of
There
how
are
music.
levels to acceptable nerdiness.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Oh
funny.
well.
I guess my last question about you growing up before we dive into the sheepdogs, musicians are often told that having a career in the music industry, man, that is a pipe dream, one in a million, no one makes it. You should forget that. You should get the education, get a good job, and just do it as a hobby. Did you have to deal with that kind of resistance from family or friends? I feel like with your dad as a musician, with your brother as a musician, that maybe you didn't have as much resistance as other people.
It's funny because my dad did give me that exact talk as a professional musician because I think he'd experienced all the difficulties of being a pro musician. Like, you're not going to have a lot of money. There's going to be a ton of competition for any gig or any kind of professional opportunity that you're going to have. And he knew from firsthand experience. So he did sit us down and recommend, like, maybe consider getting a job in the trades, especially in Saskatchewan. There's a lot more opportunity for that kind of work out there. And we did listen to him, and then we of course both went into music. And once we did, he was very supportive of us. Like he never was like upset that we chose a career in the arts. I mean, he did the same thing, so he understood. But we definitely both got that talk because, I mean, to this day, yeah, it still is a struggle. Like, as I said before, I still think of all these super talented musicians that I knew at school and just throughout life who have had to get side gigs or switch careers just because it's, like, I think what it did more than anything else was just instill a sense of how lucky I am to work in music and be able to make a living in music is a blessing, and I don't take it for granted because it's tough. It's tough out here. And there's a
It's
lot of talented people who can't. So
yeah, it's normally tough enough as it is, and then you look at the pandemic where basically uh the entertainment industry and the live event industry got hit harder than almost any other industry. And the prime minister essentially says to all musicians, your services are no longer required. You should probably think about going back to school and studying something else. And you're like, what? And man, the
old
amount of
man.
musicians I know that became real estate agents, you had the music industry that essentially died, and you had the real estate industry that went to all-time highs in like bidding wars and price sales and
Yeah,
all that stuff. And yeah, I so many musicians that became real estate agents, and once the music industry kind of opened up again, a lot of people didn't come back. So for touring musicians, sometimes it was hard to find the guys on the road because they had again learned a new trade and went to work somewhere else.
absolutely, man. We're still recovering. We're still feeling like we've been lucky enough to be back on the road for about a year now, but there's still voids in the profession. Like, it's very hard to find like a good guitar tech and stuff like that, just because a lot of these guys got out of the game because there's no work for 3 years. So yeah, it's tough, man. But I don't know. People have talked endlessly about how music's undervalued in society, and especially like financially, it's not really getting rewarded the same way. But it's such an essential part of life that people will always make it like, it's a calling to a lot of people, and it's crappy that we're not, maybe getting supported as much as we should from a financial or whatever means. But there has to be music in life. It's just part of it. Like, well, it'll always be there. So
So as we dive into the Sheepdogs, I want to set the tone. I shaved the nicest rock and roll mustache that I could muster up to try to be an honorary member of the Sheepdogs family today, and then I'm sporting my greenest shirt in honor of the artwork of your new solo album. So Shamus, do I get a 1 day honorary guest pass into the Sheepdogs family today?
Sure, man. Come on board. We love it. The stash
Attaboy.
is great, by the way. I love the stash.
Thank you. Thank you.
The
Yeah, I was
Zappa bottom piece there too.
yeah, I was getting lost. I forget, like I can't see myself, so I forget that I did this a few days ago. And I show up at hockey and everyone's making comments. I didn't even
Yeah.
remember I had it. But anyway, so as we dive into the Sheepdog, so I'm just going to set the stage. So the band forms in 2004. The band releases the albums Trying to Grow 2007, The Sheepdogs Big Stand 2008, Learn and Burn 2010, and then the Sheepdogs 2012. So you weren't officially in the band yet. So you played trombone on Big Stand and Learn and Burn. You were there as a guest. And then in 2012, you became a touring member. And in 2014, you became a full-time member. When we talked off camera, you mentioned that it's kind of, the lines are a little bit blurred between what is a touring musician, what's an official musician. So can you talk about, I guess, maybe you performing on those two albums, and then you, I guess, getting into the band as a touring member and then as a full-time member?
Sure. Well, I mean, the biggest piece of the backstory is just that the Sheepdogs was like my brother Ewan and his pals Ryan, his high school buddies Ryan and Sam. It was their band. They started as a trio, and then they added Liat, their fourth piece, a couple years into the band's existence. They were my older brother and his buddies, like bar band essentially. So they were kind of like, my cool gateway into the older world of like bars and music and girls and all that kind of stuff. So like I was a Sheepdogs fan well before I'd ever considered going to see the band, just because I was like the younger brother. So I remember seeing them play at their first ever gig at a Battle of the Bands at Louis, same place I saw Sloan, when I was 16 or 15 or whatever. And I just sort of, followed them as a more of just sort of like a younger brother supporting my older brother. Like, hey, this is my brother's new passion, and he's doing this, and it's kind of cool. But then also going to hang out at rock shows is fun, and it just sort of became part of like coming of age, and especially becoming a bar age. I realized that like I didn't really like going to the clubs as much. I like going to places that were playing music, like live music, and that kind of the arts scene was more appealing to me. And the fact that I had this connection with my older brother who was already playing at all these venues, it was kind of like a great gateway into that whole world for me. So to me, like they were just sort of the pinnacle of cool. It was like, these are my guys. And then right when they started touring and actually playing, gigs outside of Saskatoon, and they started coming back with like cool outfits that they bought on the road, and like started growing like wicked facial hair and stuff, and like they'd have these new original songs they'd written that I hadn't heard yet and stuff, because they were progressing as a band. Meanwhile I was like 17, 18, working as a short order cook or at a CD store, just sort of like coming up in their wake a little bit. I was just like, man, these guys are so cool, it's really coming on. And then that was also part of like when I was starting my own bands and playing music on my own and starting to think about moving to Toronto to take music a little more seriously. That was all kind of in the shadow of my brother and his band and them working on their music. And when I was at Humber in my third year, I was kind of a little bit at odds of what I was doing with my life, because I was like, why am I studying jazz trombone? I don't think I'm going to be able to do this as a career. This is going to be kind of difficult. What should I really be doing? That was the year that the Sheepdogs entered and won that Rolling Stone competition. And so I was just following that just as a fan. But at the same time, it was kind of this galvanizing thing for me, because I was watching my brother achieve this amazing feat of like, he was kind of, the country was getting behind the Sheepdogs and everyone was really excited that they were in this Rolling Stone competition and they were competing with American bands and doing so well. And they made it to the top two and everyone was voting for them and all that kind of stuff.
But you were also a part of that album, right? The Learn and Burn is what
I
was
played
that?
trombone. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
played
you were, I
trombone.
mean, there's a part of you that was a part of that journey.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. But I was just so thrilled for them. And in a way, for me, because I was like kind of struggling at school at the time, not struggling, but just sort of like, what am I doing here? And like seeing them succeed was motivating me to do better at school in my own regard. I was like, hey, if they can do well, I can do well. You know, like this is great. It was just sort of like this great boosting experience. And then the year of my final recital in my third year, I wrote and recorded a rock opera not dissimilar to The Shepherd and the Wolf, actually. It was like a concept suite of 30 minutes of music that I performed at my school. And I got like a pretty good mark on it. And so afterwards, me and the band were celebrating. That night, Ewan calls me and he says, hey, we've won this competition. We want to add a keyboard player to the band. You want to come on the road with us? And I was just like, yes, this is the greatest day of my life. I'll do it, of course. So I took the next year off school and I went on the road with the guys. That was 2012. And it was right at the peak of their stardom because they had just won this competition and they were just the hot band in everywhere. So I think the story I always jokingly tell is my first ever gig, we played a club show at the El Macombo in Toronto. And I was just playing off keyboard parts to make them sound more like the live or the make the live show sound more like the record. And I didn't have any shoes at the time that were like rock and roll shoes, so I just played barefoot like a homeless guy or something. It's pretty funny. And then my second ever show, we played I think it was the Indie Awards. It was some kind of award show in Toronto, but we were backing up Paul Rogers from Free. He played with us and we did like some Free songs. I was like, this is amazing. And then my third show was Coachella in California. So we kind of like just jumped right into the deep end of playing these like amazing high profile shows. I was like, what is my life now?
Yeah, well, that escalated quickly.
Yes, yes, it did.
That's funny. What I guess my question is, man, I remember that Rolling Stone cover contest. It was such a big deal. It was, sometimes these competitions they come and go, and it's not that big of a thing, but this was like everywhere. Like you kept hearing about this, and the Sheepdogs became the first independent band ever to be on the cover of Rolling Stone, and that's like the iconic music magazine.
Yeah.
What was it like? I guess taking that in, what was it like seeing, your brother and his band go through that, and you having been a part of the album that kind of launched that opportunity as well?
I was so proud. I was just like a excited family member. I was like, the biggest cheerleader that the band had. Like I said, I was my third year at school, and basically the most fun weekend I would ever have while I was at school was like the weekend that the Sheepdogs would come through town and play Toronto, and like me and all my college buddies would go to the show and get super drunk and just party real hard. So like we were just huge fans of the band. Also, at the time, I was like full on jazz nerd. Like I was studying like John Coltrane and Giant Steps and like theory matrices and crap like that. So to like go and rock out to just some like meat and potatoes classic rock was like the greatest bomb for me to like just relax into like fun, easy, accessible music. Like Sheepdogs rock and roll was just like everything that I loved at the time. So I was just thrilled to see all that stuff go down. And like I said, it was also motivating for me to be like, look, hey, I can hack my way through jazz school if my brother can, get his face on the biggest music magazine ever. It was just sort of like it just made me feel really proud, and really excited, and then opened a lot of doors just for us, musically. The fact that like the opportunity to play some of these huge festivals and to travel the world and stuff like that. So when he called and said like, hey, do you want to come on the road with us? I was just like absolutely chomping at the bit. And if anything, I was super ready musically too, because I just spent a bunch of years studying some of the hardest music ever. So I was super excited to play just some fun, easy going rock and roll and just get out there. It was such a great opportunity. So I was thrilled.
Yeah, it led to some huge opportunities, not just the festivals and the live shows, but it led to the signing with a major label, I believe Atlantic, if I remember correctly. And it led to I Don't Know being like a massive song at radio. What was your reaction to hearing I Don't Know? Like I was in Ottawa and you would hear I Don't Know all the time, and it stood out because it was playing on like current rock stations, and it didn't sound like a current song. It sounded like kind of this vintage classic rock. So it really stood out when you heard it. So it was a big deal here in Ottawa. I can't imagine like in Saskatoon or in Toronto what it was like hearing that all the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me, like I can't speak to the creation of I don't know. I mean, I've played it endlessly on stage in the live band, but that's very much, my brother and those other guys' baby because they worked on it and like the genesis of it at least. But I mean, I was such a fan of the band that to me it just felt vindicating to be like, yes, they're getting their due. Like back in Saskatoon, we listened to those guys all the time, me and my buddies, and we knew that they were a good band. So like to see them get, credit like that on like an international stage. I mean, definitely on a national stage. And to this date, Canada still is our biggest market. So it was just awesome to it's sort of like, they worked really hard. They created a good product and now they're being appreciated for it. It was just like yes, about time, we were just so thrilled. So I don't know. I mean, it was just wonderful. That time of our lives was just sort of like a nonstop gravy train of good vibes. So it was like the peak of my brother and the guys' success. And I was lucky enough to kind of like slide in and kind of ride the wave with them. And I'm very grateful to this day that I got that opportunity.
Yeah, that led to a couple platinum albums, to platinum singles, gold singles, top 10 singles, just a ton of unbelievable success. And we're going to keep the good times going because back then in 2012, you were the newest member of the Sheepdogs. However, you are no longer the newest member of the Sheepdogs. That would be Ricky Paquette. And he was kind enough to send in some kind words. And I literally got these 3 minutes before we started this interview to the point where I had already printed the questions. So we'll see if I can read my own handwriting here. So this is what Ricky Paquette, guitarist for the Sheepdogs, this is what he has to say. He says, Shamus, a great musician with an awesome sense of humor, a wizard with a gentle soul who likes to rock hard. I'm lucky and I feel proud to now get to call him a friend. Motherfucking Shamus, the real deal. So that's from Ricky
Oh,
Paquette.
Ricky, what a sweetie. Love you, Rick. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, he said he's in BC, so it was very early for him at the time that we were starting here. So
We just flew home from England last weekend together. We spent a lot of time sitting on planes, wisecracking together. So yeah, it's good. Thanks for the kind words, Rick.
so you talked about kind of the vindication of the band after all those years of working hard. Finally, the success was coming, embraced at radio, embraced by the fans. After that album, Learn and Burn, there were nominated for 3 Grammys and won all Grammys, 3 Junos and won all 3 Junos. And then a little bit later on, so in 2014, so you were officially a member of the band. You guys won for Video of the Year for Feeling Good. What does that Juno win mean to you? That that's Canada's Grammys. That's your country acknowledging, like you mentioned, your hard work and your talent and your dedication.
I mean, it's certainly an honor. I believe that win was for the music video. So, not,
But it's your song that is provided
yes.
to that music video.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, like anytime you're in the conversation is fantastic. And it's super nice to be just, even considered as being at the top of your game and being worth that level of consideration. That music video was sweet. It's the like G.I. Joe dudes like wasted each other for 3 minutes to our song. Um, but yeah, I mean, I got to give credit to the filmmakers and the guys who actually like got their hands dirty making that because they're the ones who earned that one. But like I say, it's an honor and it's great. It's great to be included in the conversation.
Yeah, there's been lots of other Juno nominations and wins for like Group of the Year and Album of the Year and Rock Album of the Year and those as well. Yeah, I want to dive into your first album with the band as a full-time member and contributor. So in 2015, Future Nostalgia, there's 4 singles: Downtown, I'm Gonna Be Myself, Bad Lieutenant, and Back Down. What thoughts, memories, emotions come to you when you think back to that album that for you as a full-time musician now kickstarted this adventure you've been on since then with the band?
So I was very excited to make that record. It was my first time going into the studio with Sheepdogs as a full-time contributing member and not just playing trombone. So that was very exciting to me. I just remember being brimming with ideas. I had so many things that I wanted to contribute, probably in an overexcited little brother kind of way. Because I remember a lot of the time you would just sort of be like, we'll get there, calm down. Like, we have a method here, you know. So I was like, what about this? We do this. We do. Oh my god, we can try that too. Like, I just very excitable. We went up to Stony Lake and we set up a studio in a barn, and we worked for a month. So it was great. We were kind of secluded. We were very, very committed to just making the best album that we could. We were working with Matt Ross Spang out of Memphis, who's a great engineer who traveled with us and helped us make that record.
And you guys produce it yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah. Ewan was very hands-on with dictating the kind of sounds that he wants to get, and it's great because he's got a really strong vision of what he wants the band to sound like, and especially for that record too. It's the poster for it back there. Nostalgia. It was great. I mean, we would get up, cook breakfast, jump in the lake each morning, and then just spend all day chipping away, you know, working on these songs. It's almost, there's no better life, if you ask me, to just sort of be, you know, secluded with your buds working on music. It's kind of like
Living
how
the
I,
dream.
yeah, I know, spend my days. So that was amazing for me, you know. I'm trying to remember, like, we were working with Rusty Mattis at the time, was the guitarist who worked with us on that record, who was a great contributor, played a lot of great slide on that album, which was good. I remember playing some pretty good weird keyboard solos. We do which is actually it's a method that you and I have developed a lot over the years. He'll get a weird keyboard and put it on a weird sound and then just tell me to play it. Because I'm good at I've got kind of better keyboard technique than he does, but he's got a very good ear towards like sounds and tones. And it's a thing we've utilized a lot where I'll just be like playing a MIDI keyboard sometimes and he'll just like adjust the tones for me. So like I can play, you know, the notes and the melodies, but he just gets the weird sounds out of me. So we did a lot of that with like weird synthesizers and Wurlitzers and keyboards and stuff like that. And I think Daryl and Dwight on that album has a cool like weird outro that we came up with keyboards and stuff like that. But I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store. I was just so thrilled to be working on music and finally getting a chance to get on wax with the Sheepdogs in beyond just playing trombone. So it was great. I loved it.
Is that the album? So I went and listened to the entire Sheepdogs discography, the Bros discography, your new album. Is that the album that has quite a few? The song titles are names. There's quite a few that have names. So you said
Yeah,
Daryl and
Aaron
Dwight.
Gordon, Daryl and Dwight. Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely. Hmm.
just lots of inspiration from
Sullivan.
people.
Yeah, I think I don't know. Maybe Ewan was just on a songwriting bent where he just loved like referencing specific people, but it was good. It was definitely a high watermark of creativity for us. Like I said, we were coming off that incredible crest of the Rolling Stone competition, and you know all the travel experiences and doors that have been open to us because of that. So I think you know Ewan was just sort of really feeling like referencing all these various people and stuff like that in his songwriting, and I don't know, we were cooking. It was great.
Yeah, you guys must have been feeling quite creative because I believe that album and a few albums had like 17 songs. I mean, you can have a full length album that's like 10 songs and that's acceptable. So you
Yeah,
guys
we had
to
a lot
like
of double
continuously
albums.
pushing the limits, you must have just had a wealth of music.
Well, and Learn and Burn had a medley on it too, and we love Abbey Road. Like the Abbey Road medley is like the best, you know, 15 minutes of pop music, basically, if you ask me. So I think we and oh, another record that we love that has that same kind of structure is Chicago Transit Authority, the first album by Chicago. Just this idea of these flowing medleys of music that are like crafted like pop songs, but there's four of them in a row with interludes, and they're just like these wonderful long form pieces of music. I think we got pretty infatuated by that. So next thing we know, every album that we made had to have a medley. You know?
My favorite song from that album is Bad Lieutenant. That has such a great groove to it. Is there, can you give us any insight into the writing and the recording of that song? Anything you can give the fans of that song that they don't know about?
Most of the Sheepdog songs are written by Ewan, so he's got kind of the inside of the writing process of that. I think it was named after the film Bad Lieutenant, starring Harvey Keitel, and Bad Lieutenant Port of Call, starring Nick Cage. So maybe you can watch those to try and I think they're both pretty raw movies.
Do
But
you remember the recording of that song?
yeah, it was one of the first ones that we worked on, and we were really going for a slow strutting kind of vibe, real kind of like mean mugging type of tune.
Are you picturing Nicolas Cage mean mugging and strutting while you do
Yeah,
it?
exactly. In our mind's eye, we just picture Nick Cage, and that's where the song comes from. No, I think I mean it's a pretty standard like slow burning blues rock kind of tune. You know, big bendy riff from Ewan and sort of ethereal reverb laden keyboards, and then bass and drums are just going all out in that slow groove. So it's just yeah, it's a mean, tough guy kind of song, but we do that kind of thing well, especially Ewan. He's got that big growly voice. He's good at kind of cultivating that kind of "don't fuck with me" energy when he's singing. So
Got that fuck you energy.
yeah, exactly.
That's funny. In 2018, you guys released the album Changing Colors, so three more singles. I've Got a Hole Where My Heart Should Be, Nobody, and Saturday Night. Were you feeling massive pressure following up your debut album with this one? So it's not the band's, sophomore album, but for you it is as a full-time contributor.
um, I mean, not so much. I especially in those days, I was very much just looking at every moment in the studio as an opportunity. Like I said, I was so eager to prove that I could, hang with the big dogs, so to speak, and contribute in any way. And I just had so many musical ideas in those early days that I was just like, just brimming with ideas and concepts and things that I wanted to try in the studio. So if anything, I was probably just pissing off my bandmates with being like, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? So by changing colors, I probably mellowed out a little bit. That record has the guitar work of Jimmy Boskill on it, who is just an amazing talent, a great pal, and a great guy to work with. Because he also has a million instruments that he can play and a million new stylistic things that he can bring to the table. So I think on that record, the most notable thing is that we were dipping into a little more country flavor, which is definitely the influence of Jim because he's a big time country guy and loves the kind of bluegrass country picking style. So, um, yeah, definitely more piano on that than I would have played on other albums. Like I typically gravitate towards electric piano, which I think is just my love of 70s funk coming out again. I love, organ and electric piano in that kind of way. But I think in that record, we were going for more of an organic country, Bob Dylan, Nashville skyline kind of thing. So I remember playing a lot more piano, country licks, that kind of thing. But again, yeah, it's another long, sprawling record with probably a few too many musical ideas in there. Like I think was that record the one that's three sides? Like it's a full record and then another side. Like it's basically another double record. So
Yeah, I kept looking and it was like 17 songs. Next album,
yeah.
17 songs. Like, wow, these guys have a lot to offer musically. Probably a year and a half ago, I had Blue Rodeo on the podcast, and when they came to Ottawa, I went out to see them, and man, Jimmy Boskill is ridiculous
Yeah,
as
he's
a
a talent. Absolutely.
yeah. When
Yeah,
that guy rips on the guitar, it's like not just because there's lots of great guitarists, but almost everything he played, it's not just that what he's playing is great and it's challenging. It's just so tasty. Like he has such a great I don't know, ear or feel or something that everything he played was it just felt good and it just seemed right. I don't know if that makes sense as a review, but
no, absolutely. I mean, of all the guys that I've worked with and like been in the studio with, he's sort of the guy who can kind of like tap into the pure musical essence in a way that few can. And just like sitting and watching him play takes in the studio was just wonderful because he'd come up with these amazing ideas and each take would be very fresh. And not only does he rip on guitar, he's also an incredible steel player. He plays fiddle. He plays mandolin. It's basically if it's got strings on it, he can rip it. Like he's one of the most talented guitar players in Canada, and it was a thrill collaborating with him. And that's really kind of I think what took Changing Colors to the next step was his presence on that record because it's really something special for sure.
yeah, the rock and roll gods smile upon him when he plays guitar for sure.
Yeah.
So that album, I believe, was recorded over a longer period than usual for other albums. That was like 6 months or more. What do you think? led to it either taking that long or for you guys allowing that much time to flesh out the album?
Yeah, so we did that one at Taurus in Toronto, and I think it was just we hadn't really done a record over a long period, like you said, over a long period of time like that. Like we've done a lot of we're going to a place, we're working with X person, and we're just going to stay until the record's done. You know, whether it be 2 weeks or like I think the self-titled record was recorded in like 2 weeks in Nashville with Pat Carney, and then we did the Future Nostalgia at Stony Lake, basically all in a month with Matt Ross Spang. And then I think just the idea of having a little more time to kind of let ideas percolate and develop was very appealing, especially to Ewan. So we were like, but at this point, too, most of us lived in Toronto. Like Ewan and I moved out here full time to live in 2014, but I'd already kind of been living here since 2009. Ryan was out here by then, and Jim lived just outside of like I think he lived at the time in Port Hope, just outside of Toronto. So it was easy for us to kind of congregate in Toronto for like big chunks of time and then just sort of work on this album at our leisure. And I think it meant that we had a kind of more easygoing process and that the songs kind of developed more organically that way because you're not I don't know, you're not like you get more time to fine tune stuff that way, and you get more time to think about stuff and to clear your head and think about some other things for a while and then come back and work on music is good too because you can kind of like I don't know. The ideas turn out differently when you work on them very intensely in short periods of time. Like sometimes it's good, but then sometimes you can't kind of have them develop in a nice way, as if when you have the luxury of more time. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but
Yeah,
they just turn out different.
yeah, you mentioned before that, you couldn't take full credit for the Video of the Year Juno Award. It's Video of the Year. Two more Juno nominations for this album. So Group of the Year and Rock Album of the Year. You can take credit for those nominations. I mean,
It's a good
those
one.
are, yeah, there you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, it's a great record. It's one that I definitely stand by. A lot of great songs on there, and great playing, great solos. Sort of just like top down. It's just it's great to be recognized when you feel like you've made a good piece of art like that too. So and also just the fact that at that point in our career, I think we've been playing 100 plus shows a year internationally and nationally, traveling around. I think it was just sort of a nice recognition by the sort of Canadian music industry that like, hey, look, these guys are out there playing shows, putting on events. If you're a fan of rock music, go see the Sheepdogs. We'll give them a tip of the cap as, group of the year kind of thing. We didn't win, but nice to be nominated.
So you talked about how much you guys were playing. So in support of that album, you guys played over 200 shows. You're going out Canada, the US, Europe. What was your life like when you're on the road that much, 200 plus dates? Some people that might be their favorite part is the touring and the live shows. Some people might see it as that's the necessary evil, that maybe they prefer the writing and the recording, and we have to get out because that's how you promote the band and you sell more records and you generate revenue and ticket sales and merch sales. What was your life like with 200 plus shows a year, and what are your thoughts on playing that much?
Well, definitely you live out of a suitcase and your home life is compromised. So it's tough. It is tough, but also playing rock and roll every night is such a thrill and such a treat, and especially to play your songs with your buddies and my literal brothers, like it kind of doesn't get any better than that. We always joke that like you're on the road too long and you start to go crazy, and then you go home and you're home for a couple of weeks and you start to get bored and you're like, what am I doing? You get back out on the road, So it's just like it's a fine line, kind of finding the balance between the two. But I mean, touring that long definitely wears you down just because you're always on the go, and no matter how comfortable you are with live performance and all that, there is a certain amount of anxiety just on a daily level, knowing that you need to get in front of people and perform. So like, it's when you have that day after day after day, it kind of wears you down a little bit. But it's also just like it's kind of my life at this point. Like that's been my professional life since I was 20, 21. I've been a professional musician, and the idea of traveling and playing is that's it's my bread and butter. So I love it. Parts of it I hate, but I don't think there's such thing as a perfect job, like everyone hates some aspects of their job, and getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to get to the airport to fly across the country sucks sometimes, but you got to do what you got to do. I mean, travel is a beautiful thing as well. I think I'm blessed to be able to go to all corners of the globe and see crazy things and eat, experience crazy stuff too, So I mean, you take the good with the bad, but I think getting to play music professionally, again, like I said before, is the greatest. So I'll never complain.
Yeah, it's better than digging ditches or doing construction in the winter in
Exactly.
Canada. That's for sure. Is so say it was 200 shows in support of that album. Is that pretty standard for how much you guys play per year, or was that like the most? That was like
I think
excessive.
that might have been particularly a big year. I mean, we had years. I remember reading. You remember that band Jet? The Are You Gonna Be My Girl?
Yeah.
Um, I remember reading that they played 300 shows in a year, and being like, "Wow!" And then they broke up the next year. So,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, they're related. I actually
yeah,
just saw there was an interview with the singer for Goldfinger, and apparently they're in the Guinness Book of World Records for most shows played in a year. They played, I think it was 600 and something, like 678 shows in one year. And I think maybe they were going for the record, so they
right.
like double booked every day of the year. But that's like the standard of how insane you can get.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's like an Eric Clapton quote too about like touring sucks and automatically like ultimately wears you down, and the only thing you can do to make it more tolerable is to throw money at it. But it's just sort of like a never-ending beast that's kind of coming for you, and like eventually it'll just wear you down. But like you said, you got to get out there, you got to promote um your record, and there's no better way to do it, especially with like how effed up the music industry is as far as like you don't make any money streaming, you don't really make any money selling records elsewhere. You got to hit the pavement. You got to get out there and play and get in front of people. But the reward is that when you play a good show and you get that connection with the audience, and you feel the buzz that you can only get from a live rock show, it's like that's sort of reward enough. So yeah, it's a lot. Playing 200 shows a year is very taxing, but it's there's plenty of silver linings, and there's lots of great things about it too. So I think it's just about finding that balance so you can play as much as you can without going crazy.
So in 2021, you guys released the EP No Simple Thing. So two more singles, Keep On Loving You and Rock and Roll Ain't No Simple Thing. So Keep On Loving You is like one of my all-time favorite Sheepdog songs. That's a great song. What were the challenges of writing, recording, and releasing music during the pandemic? 2021 is like right in the middle of the chaos.
Yeah. Yeah. So, obviously we established ourselves as a hard touring band, and then COVID comes along and we're stuck at home for a long time. So we were a bit at odds. At first it was like, oh great, extended summer vacation, great. I can stay at home and get caught up on all the video games I haven't played in a few years. But then, quickly you're like, am I ever going to get my work back? Am I going to be able to like ever go back out on the road? So that for us was just like basically an exercise in being like, look, let's try and make some music even in this compromised situation. So we all got together and we bubbled up in Montreal at a studio called Mixart, and we recorded those 5 songs as just sort of a way to like get some momentum in the depths of COVID, where like every band was kind of struggling to keep their heads above water. And that's a notable record for me because it's the first time I got one of my own compositions recorded by the Sheepdogs, a song called "Are You a Good Man?" So I was very thrilled to get that in there. And yeah, and "Keep on Loving You" was another great, like a real kind of almost departure in the Sheepdog sound, because we were really going for like a kind of bubblegum pop kind of sound with our kind of like cheesy organs and fun, really kind of like upbeat, fun loving kind of sound. But yeah, that's a great EP. And again, released in kind of a weird time where like maybe it didn't quite get the same level of promotion as a regular release with like accompanying touring and everything like that. But also, the captive audience of COVID, I think, meant that probably a lot of people checked it out just because there was nothing else going on. So they were like, hey, some new music. So I'm very proud of that one as well.
Yeah, I think the two singles ended up being top 5 singles. So maybe
Yeah,
if
rock and roll
it,
as well. Yeah.
yeah, so even if maybe the whole EP you don't think got the response that it deserved or the attention it deserved. At least the two singles were big singles on the radio, and it's, you know, during a kind of a dark time like that, it's nice to still have an outlet and be creative and see that positivity of, you know, people embracing those songs at radio.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
The one thing that stands out in listening to the entire Sheepdogs discography is the harmonies. You guys are known for just having great harmonies. Everyone can sing, everyone can do harmonies. My question to you is, has hearing and singing harmonies always come easy to you, or is that something you had to work on? A lot of times it's just you sing and you're great at being in, you know, in tune with yourself, but then having to do harmonies afterwards, that's, to me, that's a different skill that you have to develop. Maybe some people have perfect pitch or something and get it right away.
Yeah, my brother's really good at that. I'm not as good of a singer, so it takes me a bit of work to get my harmonies up. I think, you know, I have that sort of jack of all trades skill where I have like a pretty good musical foundation and can do a bunch of different things. So I'm good at figuring out harmonies. I might have to practice them a little bit more to get them. My brother's great though. He's really good at the sort of effortlessly just hearing and replicating. He's got the ear of a mimic. Like he's really good at doing voices and impressions, really good at just sort of recalling things like that. So he's kind of got the natural singer and natural harmonizing vibe. The rest of us might have to work at it. Sam also is quite good at just pulling harmonies out of the air too. Um, but it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about, like, you know, the Beatles or bands like the Eagles and stuff like that. Bands where everybody sings, and that idea of everybody bringing their voice to like a joint experience is sort of like, it just sort of makes the whole thing a little more euphoric, you know, like everyone's playing, but everyone's also singing. It's just like there's no one's scowling or mean mugging that way. There's no one kind of off in their own little world. You know, bands like Sloan did the same thing. It just sort of makes for a much more like invested experience if everyone's not only lending their instrument but also their voice to the whole thing. It just makes it more inclusive or something. Or, I don't know, just better.
When I see a live performance, to me, what tells me that this is like a professional group and that they're next level is when I hear harmonies. You know, when
Yeah.
someone does an hour set and it's just the one person on the mic and there's not a single harmony in the hour, to me, that's like amateur. Like, we got to get someone else in there to have harmonies. So as soon as I hear harmonies or, you know, 2-part, 3-part harmonies, to me, that is like one of the lines that people cross to be next level professional musicians.
Well, the bands that we liked back in the day, that's how they did, man. Like the Chicago is the same way, you know, like they just, I think maybe harmony was just sort of more present in that, or the earlier days of pop music, of the pop music that we like, you know, and maybe nowadays there's less bands that do that kind of thing, but you know, we like it and we try and capture that kind of energy. And like I said, for me, I have to work a little more at it than maybe some of the other guys do, but it's great. And I think the rewards, you know, speak for themselves.
You mentioned the Eagles. What's funny is I have a friend that went and saw them not that long ago. And legit, my one question, they said, "Oh, I just saw the Eagles." My only question, I said, "Oh, how were the harmonies?" Like, that's what I
Yeah.
associate with the band. And they're like, "Oh, it was incredible." So we've made our way all the way to the final album here from the Sheepdogs. So Out of Sight comes out in 2022, two singles, Find the Truth and I Want to Know You. Nominated for a Juno Award, Rock Album of the Years. Man, the Juno loves you guys. It's unbelievable. I mean, it can't be that the Junos love you. It's that you guys put out great albums consistently, and then they acknowledge that. But that's awesome. Another Juno nomination last year. And I want to hit you with a stat here that I don't know if you're aware of this, but the Sheepdogs have charted top 10 singles in 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2015, 2017, 2018, 2021, and 2022. What do you account for that kind of longevity? I mean, for a band to have just one top 10 hit is huge. That's like a game changer for a band. For you guys to basically have a top 10 hit every year since 2010, what does that stat mean to you?
I didn't know that. That's amazing. I guess it's just it's nice to hear that. I mean, we're very committed to this. Like we work at this, you know, like this is we approach this like it's our job, you know, like I try to work on songcraft every day, or I practice to try to get a little bit better at what I do. So, um, and my brother would be thrilled to hear that because I know he has the same approach. Like we try to take this seriously and we try to do what we do well and at a high level. So it's great to hear that. I didn't know. That's amazing.
Yeah, that means you have no throwaway singles, which is good. They're all legit singles you're releasing. You guys have some shows coming up, some tours coming up. So a few shows here in September, and then a tour in October and November with Larkin Poe across the UK and Europe. What can you share with our listeners about that tour, and if they're able to get out to those shows, what can they expect from a Sheepdogs show?
Well, we'll be open up for Larkin Poe, who are great, sisters out of I think South Carolina. Maybe don't quote me on that, but but they're a great, blues rock pairing, and we'll be playing all over Europe with them. Where blues rock is king over there. They love that kind of stuff. So it'll be a great opportunity for us to get in front of some new people over there. And Europe's been great. I feel like we've played some great shows, Europe and the UK, over the past few years, but we're still kind of waiting to like really kind of break through. So we're constantly having people over there come up to us being like, "You guys are amazing. How have I never heard of you before?" And I'm just like, we're right on the cusp of becoming, a better known band over there. But a big part of it is just continuing to get over there and playing more and, getting more exposure. So this tour will be great for that. I'm very much looking forward to getting over there. And yeah, the rest of the summer, we're playing at the CNE on Friday in Toronto. So doesn't get much more rock and roll than that. And then
So today is Wednesday. I'll
yeah,
release this episode a little bit later today, so people will still have 48 hours to get to
get the dust
this
down to the
Toronto
fair,
show.
baby. Yeah. And then yeah, I think we got a couple shows in BC
Some
later this month.
festivals it look like in
Yeah,
Canada. Yeah.
yeah, and we're doing a festival in Colorado. So I mean, that's our typical summer. Is we just sort of bop around and play as many outdoor festival shows for the good people as we can. So we'll keep that going. And then yeah, I mean, it's probably high time for us to start chipping away at a new record. So the party train rolls on.
Got to keep the top 10 single streak going into
Right, I love that.
twenty twenty four.
Yeah.
So what's awesome is I did the Ricky interview, I believe around February. I could be wrong. And just maybe a few days later, you guys had your final show on this massive tour, and it was here in Ottawa at the NAC. I caught the final show of a massive tour. And here's my quick review. I had great songs, great high energy performance, great musicianship, lots of badass guitar riffs and solos, great harmonies. The audience was loving it. That's my random review from that
Love
show. Not bad,
it.
eh?
Yeah,
Not bad.
that's what we're trying to do. Yeah.
And I have a fan question sent in. This is from Mike Lamonde. His question is, why do you think people love that throwback Southern rock sound when there's so much new music being put out into the world every day? Even the younger generations are grabbing towards it.
That's an excellent question. I mean, I personally have always loved that late 60s, early 70s sound. Like, I think it's just sort of a golden era of pop music, an era where recording techniques were evolving to the point where you capture stuff, overdub stuff, manipulate stuff in an artistic way. Now the technology is so advanced that you don't even really have to have any level of musicianship to make music. Like, you can just be adept at manipulating software and you can create cool music. And that's cool in its own way, but I like that blend of you still have to get a group of good musicians together to make music. And I think that era, late 60s, early 70s, with guys like the Beatles and stuff, who are just starting to explore the studio in a way to get real trippy, psychedelic, cool stuff that still had a base level of human beings in the room playing music together. That to me is just like the perfect blend of technology and actual musicianship that makes the best music, if you ask me. So I just love the recordings of that era, the sound of the aesthetic, like what the recording engineers were trying to get. To me, like, that's the stuff that sounds the best, is the 60s and 70s. I don't know. I mean, there's more people in the world now than there was then. So just by the sheer numbers of population, you'd think there'd be plenty of good musicians in the earth now, and there are. I just think the ethos has changed. Like, people are trying to sound different and not necessarily better to my ear. I don't know. I kind of just think we the aesthetic peaked in that era for me, at least. And I think a lot of people agree with me.
So let's dive into the duo. So Bros that formed in 2014 with your brother Ewan. So Bros is stylized all capitals Bros. So do you have to say it correctly? Do you have to go Bros? Is that how it's supposed to be?
No, I think we just did that to make it like pop a little bit more on the page kind of thing.
You don't have to yell it. It's not all
You
caps, someone
yelling
yelling.
is encouraged. If you want to yell it, by all means. Yeah.
We're not mad at it if someone yells it out. Oh, where did the idea of starting another band with your brother come from? I guess you mentioned that maybe the Sheepdogs, it's you have to play within a certain box sonically, and you guys have love of other genres of music. So did it feel
Oh, yeah.
like those songs you couldn't have them in the Sheepdogs repertoire, so you needed something else?
Well, so I've always been a songwriter, much like my brother. And when I first joined the Sheepdogs, it was very much in the capacity of a sideman. Like they were like, "Hey, we're at the top of our game. We got a formula that works, but we want to add you as a keyboard player." So I was very cognizant of like not wanting to like mess with the formula at all. But as time passed and I was playing with you and more, I was like, "Look, I got a bunch of songs that could work with a band." And he was like, "Well, sure, we could try some of those." And eventually I have written songs for the Sheepdogs, like, recently in the last few years. But he was sort of saying at the time that, we've got a formula that works and a sound that people like. But if you want to write some songs with me, we could start another project. So, and we started the two of us. It's actually funny, despite being brothers who are musicians, we never had really written songs or played original music together until that point, in our mid 20s. But it went well because we have very similar taste in music, and a lot of my early, like I said before, I my early taste in music was kind of cultivated from like raiding my brother's record collection. He had this great record collection, and I used to like I had a 6 CD boombox that I would go and like I would sit and play video games, and I would get 6 different CDs from Ewan's collection and check them out and listen to them. And then when I was done, I would go and he would give me 6 more CDs to check out of just like wide ranging genres and all over the place. And so like we very much developed the same reference point for music. So we would know all the same references and know all the same pieces of music and bands and stuff and have very similar tastes. So it meant that we had a great shorthand when we were working together. I would play a little reference to something and he'd be like, "Did you just quote Billy Preston in Outer Space or something like that?" I'd be like, "Why, yes, I did." And then next thing we know, we're off and running with like, almost like a telepathic level of musical communication, which I think only comes from being brothers. So yeah, I sent him a whole bunch of tunes that I had written, and he sort of cherry picked a few to work on. And we met at a studio in Toronto and started chipping out a few tunes. And the first two that we worked on were "Tell Me" and "Brazil." And they sort of became the nature of this new project. And then those two songs, "Tell Me" is very much like it's almost got like a hip hop beat, but with like
Cool
Donny
guitar.
Hathaway, Stevie Wonder vocal delivery, and like lots of electric pianos and organs and stuff like that. And which is a bit of a departure from Sheepdog's kind of guitar driven sound. And "Brazil" is almost like a kaleidoscopic 60s pop with just like weird tempo changes and meter changes and horns. And it's like Baroque, weird, like it's just very eclectic. And so with sort of the framework of those two songs in mind, Ewan and I were like, "Well, look, why don't we try and make an album of just like kind of weird and wonderful pop music and just draw on whatever sources that we want. The only exception being that let's not have any kind of like straight ahead rock and roll tunes because we'll save that kind of stuff. Sheepdogs can't." And yeah, so we made that first Bros record, and it kind of took off more than we kind of ever expected it would from like a weird side project, especially the song "Tell Me" just kind of blew up. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah, that song, I believe, I could be wrong, but it had like 13 million plays on
Yeah,
Spotify. It had some like ridiculous number.
it's our highest across all of our projects. It's the highest streaming song that we've had. It just really had a life of its own. So it's pretty awesome.
Yeah, so you guys, we mentioned, formed in 2014. Then 2 years later, you guys released your debut album, Volume One, in 2016. That album has over 1 million spins, just a million streams. What does it mean to you that that many people listen to this side project you guys started?
I mean, I was thrilled because it was a great chance for me to finally get my songs out there. Obviously, I'm super chuffed with the success of the Sheepdogs because it's a band I'm very invested in. But to get my original compositions out and have people engage with them, I was very thrilled with that. And it's also kind of nice because it's such sort of weird music that's very close to my heart because it's just like we didn't set out to make anything deliberately with commercial appeal. Like the whole idea was to just make music essentially to like make each other laugh. Like I would just sort of make a song that's as goofy and ridiculous as possible and show it to you, and you'd be like, haha, cool, let's record it. And then the idea that we can put that kind of music out there and other people have the same reaction is nice. It's nice to know that there's people out there who have similar, eclectic musical tastes as us. To make a weird personal record and have people react positively to it is a nice feeling. Yeah, people out there are weird like we are. Yeah.
The there's two singles, Tell Me, that you've mentioned, and Couldn't Hear a Thing. The single Tell Me becomes the theme song for CBC radio program Q with Tom Power. Then you guys
Yeah.
release a second full-length album, Volume 2, in 2021. There's another single, Never Gonna Stop. Between the Sheepdogs and Bros, you guys have over 500,000 listeners per month just on Spotify. So I want you to take a moment and think about 500,000 people every month listening to your music. Like, can you visualize that? I mean, how do you visualize you play an arena? I go down the street to the Ottawa Senators where they play, and there's, I don't know, 22,000 people, and you're looking at a massive arena, 22,000. And now picture 500,000. That's how many people per month listen to music you are a part of. I don't know. Can you just
Just
talk
gratitude.
about that for a
I
second?
don't know. That's amazing. I guess it's an honor and a privilege to have that kind of platform. I guess, but just I don't know. It feels good. It feels great to know that people are into music. Such a personal thing. It's you work on creating these ideas, and for me, the genesis of so many of my musical ideas is just like sitting by myself in a room, not unlike the one I'm in right now, plunking away on a musical idea, and the first thing that comes across your head is always, is this any good? Is this anything? Can I do anything with this? And then to get that vindication from, playing live or knowing that people are listening to your music and exploring it and appreciating it is a wonderful feeling. So it's just gratitude. I'm just so pleased.
So most people won't know what it's like to be in a band with a family member. Can you share what is the best part and the worst part of being in a band with your brother? I guess best and worst parts.
Well, the best part would probably be that what I referenced earlier, that kind of musical shorthand and the understanding that we have. Like he can play something, and I'll immediately kind of understand what he's going for, or the reference, or like what's informing the part that he's kind of playing. Or even sometimes I can help almost finish his musical sentences because I'll be like, "Oh, you're kind of going for like a George Harrison thing here," or like, "Oh, maybe you're going for like a Stevie Wonder or Sly and the Family Stone groove over here, or you want this kind of thing." And so we can just we like when we're cooking, we can move at such a quick pace and just like really really be in the zone. And also the idea of with a family member in the band, you've always got that kind of level of support and love and care, you know.
If a
And
street fight breaks out, you've got at
yeah,
least one guy that has your back.
exactly. And believe it or not, that has actually come up in the 10 years or so that we played with Sheepdogs. But the other side of the coin is that nobody can piss you off like your brother. And we argue and bicker just like any other.
Does he play the big brother card every now and
Oh,
then?
constantly. Yeah.
How dare he?
He has to. It's his literally the role he was born to play.
It's his rite of passage. You
Yeah.
guys actually have a theme song. There's a Bros theme song. When that plays, do you feel like a superhero with your own theme song? And then when you guys play live, please tell me that before you go on, the lights are down and the theme song plays and you walk out to it like a wrestler. Does that ever happen?
We should do that. We actually just play it in the set like a normal piece of music, but we absolutely need to do it as walk-on music. Um, yeah, man. I mean, that was conceived as like a Lalo Schifrin cop show kind of theme, like Dirty Harry or Bullets or something like that. Um, so the idea that you and I are like, badass cops on the mean streets of San Francisco or something like that. But yeah, that's very much the energy that we're trying to create with those kinds of songs. We love, yeah, wrestling and 70s cop shows and action movies and cinema, and stuff that has that kind of like funky percussive music. And the idea of writing a theme song to an imaginary show like that was just something that really got our imaginations working wild, brass and percussion and propulsive rhythms and that kind of stuff, stuff that makes you want to like have a sweet mustache and wear sunglasses and slide over the hood of a car.
I think you succeeded with that song. That's the vibe that I get. So I have one final bros question, and then we'll dive into your new album. And I'm so excited to dive into it. I have so many questions, and I really enjoyed listening to it. So, final question about bros. You guys released a Christmas EP. Have you guys always wanted to write and release Christmas music? I mean, if you look at, if you were able to talk to Mariah Carey or Michael Bublé or Josh Groban, they'll tell you that Christmas music could be quite lucrative if you get the right song that catches on.
I think, well, I'll preface it by saying that you and I love sort of classic songwriting, and so many of the sort of classic secular, I'll say secular Christmas songs because they're not the like old timey, "Oh Come All You Faithful" kind of stuff, but like um, they're sort of like jazz standards, and they're written in sort of like classic musical tropes, like delivered by crooners, and like "Let It Snow" and that kind of stuff. So we love the idea of challenging ourselves to write, that kind of like classic Christmas song. And the other thing is like, yes, any Christmas music that you release is going to be perceived as a bit of a cash grab just because like the commercialism of Christmas time is insane, but it's just a fact. And, it's nice to have music make music with a captive audience. And it's just a fact that if you make Christmas music, it'll definitely be gobbled up by people who are willing to consume stuff at Christmas time. So but I think we kind of lean into that and make our music deliberately a little bit schmarmy and cheesy, especially our Christmas stuff. But we also love old timey, feel good, classically written songs like that. And it's a fun challenge to try and get yourself to write like a sort of the idea of like a timeless, evergreen Christmas song is fun for two guys who like writing. The challenge of writing songs in any genre or any style. So it's a thing that we've kind of challenged ourselves with, and lo and behold, they've actually been quite successful. So we kind of keep chipping away at making a few Christmas songs every now and then, and we're probably going to wind up doing a Christmas album one of these years, compiling everything all together. So
That's awesome. Yeah, I looked into kind of the financial numbers behind the Christmas hits every year, and Mariah Carey, if she did nothing else, period, like just
Queen of Christmas, right?
if she did nothing but have her music play at Christmas, forget like the massive catalog of music she has and all the other ways she makes money. Just at Christmas, from her past Christmas catalog, she makes between $600,000 and $1.2 million every Christmas from Christmas staples. So, and
Miracle Man.
like All I Want for Christmas Is You, I think is the biggest one. And every year it goes to number one. Like she legit every year has a number one single in the world.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
so stupid. Like it's ridiculous.
But I mean, like, hey, if you can get in on that, like, I don't know. Not to be like just
I
going
sound
like,
angry, but I'm just jealous. That's all.
no, I am too. And also that song's kind of a banger, like I've gotten to the point in my life where like, yeah, it's a cheesy Christmas song, but you can just analyze it from like the craft that went into making a song like that. Like the chord changes are good, the melody is good, it's expertly played, and also just like hats off to her. She made a great Christmas song. Of course, you should make that kind of money every year. Like you just appreciate the game.
Yeah, so we're gonna put it right now. We're gonna put it out into the ether to the Christmas gods that the sheepdogs, that bros, that you guys have the next big Christmas staple that gets in rotation every single year. So there you go. I just put it out there, and hopefully they're paying attention.
See what happens.
You're not mad at it. So we're gonna dive into your solo career, and I have the perfect segue. Are you ready for this?
Ah, man.
So I have someone that has gone on tour with the Sheepdogs, who also mentions how big of a fan he is of your new solo album. So that's going to segue from Sheepdogs from Bros into the Shamus stuff. So this comes in from Bruce Nickel, and his official title that he bestowed upon himself for the Sheepdogs, backline technician and goodwill ambassador. So there you go. And this is what Bruce Nichols says. Shamus is a great fella in a group filled with great fellas. Musically, he's incredible. As an organist, keyboard player, he is above reproach. As a guitar player, his ideas are fresh and interesting, which is difficult to do in a band full of excellent guitar players. Most importantly, he's a great hang, very intelligent, and a total blast, especially when it comes to pop culture and obscure film and TV references. I'm a big fan of his new solo album, best fantasy rock album to come out in a while. So that's from Bruce Nichols.
Thank you, Bruce. You're a beaut. Love you, man. That's great.
Bruce is a beaut. So let's dive into to the solo album. So for our loyal podcast listeners, we have some that listen to every single interview, regardless of who the artist is. So for those listeners that maybe haven't had a chance to listen to the new album, how do you describe the sound of the music? I know it's like the hardest thing to do for a musician that doesn't want to get boxed into any genre.
Well, I call it fantasy rock, which is a genre that kind of doesn't exist. So a lot of people are confused by it. But I think of it as in the early 70s and late 60s, all the like sort of pre-metal hard rock bands were just sort of making awesome blues influenced rock and roll, like hard rock, like your Sabbaths and Zeppelin and Uriah Heep and bands like that. And they were all kind of writing songs that vaguely flirted with like fantasy imagery, like Led Zeppelin was using Tolkien lyrics, and Uriah Heep literally has an album called Demons and Wizards, and just all that kind of stuff, songs about dragons and that kind of stuff, which just sort of seems like some sort of cheesy juvenile, dude subject matter. And it is, don't get me wrong. But like I always loved that stuff. Because I loved fantasy growing up as a kid. I loved, Greek mythology and Norse mythology, tales of Hercules and stuff. And my favorite movie when I was a little kid was Jason and the Argonauts, the 1963 version with the like claymation skeletons at the end and the Hydra and Clash of the Titans with Release the Kraken and all that kind of stuff. So I loved all the kind of like classic high medieval fantasy tropes and stuff like that. And I love that all these sort of hard rock and early 70s concept albums always seem to kind of like flirt with that stuff a little bit. And then, I'm also a gamer, video games, fantasy novels, all that kind of stuff. So it's all that stuff comes very naturally to me. And to blend those ideas, I thought would be a fun kind of exercise. So, I mean, musically, it's basically just sort of psychedelic rock. And there's maybe a little bit of jam bands, jazz stuff in there. Like I had a guy tell me he thought it sounded like Herbie Hancock. I was like, sick, love that,
I'll take it.
Yeah. But the songs are sort of basically just collections of riffs, and if we're gonna get real jazz school about it, you could say they're all just sort of like little modal mood pieces that kind of hang out in one key, and then there's solo explorations and stuff like that. But then the sort of high concept part of it came in piece, like looping all the pieces together thematically with like little interludes and stuff like that. So the whole album flows together like one long form piece of music, like the Dark Side of the Moon, I think would be a great example. It's just a long form record. Everything's linked thematically. But if you actually listen to Dark Side of the Moon, most of the time they're just like hanging out on 2 chord jams, like they're just sort of like musically it's not that complex, but they just present it as like this grand, long operatic form, like a big grand piece of music. And I love that approach. I love the idea that you could create this huge epic art form, but at the end of the day it's basically still just like 2 chord jams, which are my favorite things musically. So I had that idea. I had a whole bunch of riffs and stuff that didn't kind of fit into the regular verse chorus songwriting approach that I often employ. So I kind of looped them all together into this loose narrative that I had of the idea. I had these characters in mind. I had the idea of a heroic character called the Shepherd and a villainous character called the Wolf, and the idea that these two characters would have some kind of conflict. So I sort of wrote this loose fable involving these two characters, jammed out a bunch of ideas, and then I got my the dungeon master in my D&D campaign to come play some drums for me, and I got the bass player in my first ever bass band, in my first ever band, to come play some bass, and the three of us jammed out these ideas, and I filled in the rest of the gaps playing lots of keyboard and guitar. And we were like, let's just go full nerd, full fantasy, and try and tell it like an epic cycle through like psychedelic rock jams. And that was kind of the idea behind it.
That might be the best description of someone's music we've ever had. That was such a good intro into the album. You made a bunch of points that I was gonna make. That's perfect. So I actually am skipping ahead to notes because I had this written down. The whole album has a vision for the music, the lyrics, the sound, the production, the art. It's all one cohesive package, like Dark Side of the Moon. That was the example that I had. So we're on the same page, and that's, one of the greatest albums of all time. So if that's the one that comes to mind as, an artist that it doesn't seem like anything is just randomly thrown together. It seems like there's been a lot of thought behind everything. Like the album artwork ties into the lyrics and the characters and the sound and the production and the music videos and the card game and the map. Like everything is like the stroke of one genius that sees it all and fleshes it out in different forms. So that's like the highest praise that I can give, I think.
Thank you. Well, I mean, the idea was sort of you're not just making songs, you're making a world. You're making a world for the listener to get lost into, and the idea that everything related to the album just creates more intricacies to get lost into, Like I love it. Take like fantasy books. Like I read the George R. R. Martin Game of Thrones series as the show was coming out. I actually saw the show first, but then I was like, oh, I should check out these books. And I was like, oh, these are sick. And when you spend a lot of your life in a tour van, it's great to have a really long fantasy novel to get lost into. But what's great about those books is that they have the narrative, but they also have all these tertiary parts to the story that maybe are not super necessary to include for like the bulk narrative, but they're creating a world to get lost into. Like you have all these other families and other continents, and like just the idea that you're lost in this beautiful world that you can escape into is sort of part of the fun. So I tried to bring that approach to making the record, like I've got the songs, and the songs are sort of the core narrative, the idea that the shepherd and the wolf, and they meet and they do battle, and it's good versus evil and man versus nature and blah blah blah. But also there's jams and there's fun extraneous stuff and cool grooves and mood pieces to get lost into. And then the album would have like the gatefold, when you open it up, would have a map, to get like lost in the world, and like a story, and the idea that you can just sort of like, I don't know, smoke a doobie and enter this world and just hang out in the world of the shepherd and the wolf for a while was kind of like my big dream, like step into my lair, that kind of thing.
I read the whole Game of Thrones series like you did. The
Nice.
first book is so good. The first book is like ridiculous. The second book's great. They're all good, but man, I remember the first book being like, holy crap, that is a
The
great
one
book.
that hooks you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
do you think he'll ever release the final two books? It's a long time coming here.
I'm starting to have my doubts,
He's not a young pup either, and he's not in great shape. So
No, and also the fact that I think the real diehards of the series weren't particularly happy with how the series ended. I feel like he's gonna be,
he has to kind of rewrite maybe what he had.
yeah, he either has to rewrite it, or I feel like he's just gonna be like, let the cultural phenomenon die down and move in. Like he seems like he's happy exploring other things. Like we went to that Meow Wolf museum that he's like involved in this like creative art space in Santa Fe called Meow Wolf, which is like a haunted house and a museum all in one, where you can just go and explore this crazy place. It's a really cool immersive art experience, and it's like financed and supported by George R. R. Martin. I just sort of feel like he's getting into other ventures. He's made his nest egg off of the books and the show, and now I don't know if he has any desire to finish it.
Well, there's the prequels, right? House of the Dragon. I think there's a Jon Snow series coming out as well, I've heard. And you're into video games, so Elden Ring came out, and it's
Oh,
one of the biggest games ever, one of the best reviewed games of all time, and he's the one that like developed the world and the characters and everything. So,
yeah, talk
man,
about a
this
world
guy,
building.
yeah,
Yeah.
this guy's like doing everything. I don't know if we should just lock him in a room to finish the book, or
We might
there's
have
too many lucrative opportunities. Um, so the album is The Shepherd and the Wolf came out February 24th of this year. There's three singles, so Days of High Adventure, Song of a Wolf, and The Big Dog. How has the reception been so far from critics or fans? What are you hearing? Like you're so close to the project, and you know you wrote the songs. Obviously, you love it. Have you been hearing great things? Like I listened to it. I have, you know, I'll be telling you my thoughts about it as we go. And then Bruce loved it. What are you hearing on your end?
Well, it's niche, and I kind of knew that making it. Like I was very much leaning into this concept, this sort of hyper nerdy fantasy rock concept. And that was the thing while I was finalizing it, my girlfriend was just constantly saying, like, put something in there for the girls. Make sure this is still accessible to girls, you know, because it's such a like juvenile boys thing. But th from what I've experienced, the people who love it really love it, and that's great because those are like my people, you know, like they love all the little references to like the 70s rock mythology and stuff, and they love that there's a world and you know to explore and all the like the fantasy stuff. So the people who are into it are just like, oh yes, finally, like this is awesome, which is great. I think maybe the casual music fan is maybe a little bit like, okay, you know, but they might still like some of the songs. I remember I famously got a bit of a lukewarm reaction from my uncle who's such a supporter of the Sheepdogs, and he loves Bros because he loves the kind of classic pop. Like he's a like a jazz musician kind of guy, you know. So I think when I made this like archaic sort of proto heavy metal psychedelic rock record, he's a little like, okay, what is this? Like, how do I, you
You
know?
need to get him a few edibles and then have him
Yeah,
listen to it
exactly.
again. He's just
Yeah.
not in the right frame of mind to listen to it. I feel like when you said, you know, the people that love it really love it, it reminds me of like Rush fans or like Tool fans. It's like
Totally.
those that get it really get it, and those that love it really love it. And those are the fans that you want, anyways.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I've been really pleased. I knew, like, you know, when you're setting out to make a record like this, that you're kind of like sacrificing a bit of mainstream appeal. But the beauty of that is that, like, look, hey, I got a lot of musical outlets. I'm blessed in that I've got Sheepdogs, I've got Bros, I've got, you know, if I want to, I can grab my horn and head out and meet some buddies and just play at the, you know, the Cameron House in Toronto and play blues and stuff if I want. Like, I got a lot of musical outlets. So it was pretty awesome for me to get a chance to make this really specific, you know, musical project that I was really passionate about and just like kind of go for it, you know? So then it is really rewarding to have people who are into fantasy and into that type of rock music come up to me and be like, dude, I'm super stoked that you made this record. And that, you know, that just warms my heart. That thrills me. So it's
So
all
I
good.
I put on my good pair of studio headphones. I listened to the album three times in its entirety, and these are
Yeah,
the
man.
notes that I took down. I wrote, the album has such a great vibe. It's an album that makes you want to hop in the car, roll down the windows, go on an adventure, and play the album in its entirety. Those are my notes.
That's awesome, man. Definitely, yeah. The adventure vibe was something I really like like the idea of escapism and getting lost and just I don't know, just committing wholeheartedly to the idea of adventure, you know, like it's as almost like a juvenile idea, but like one that I remember as a kid believing so strongly, like the that feeling I would get when I would, as a kid, fire up, you know, the first Lord of the Rings movie or sit down with like a new Zelda game and just be like, here we go, adventure time, let's go. Like that was like
Like
something.
the hero's journey, right? The call to
Yeah,
adventure. Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Little Joseph Campbell there, very
Yeah.
good.
What is that? The something a thousand, the man with
The
a
hero
thousand.
with a thousand
That's
faces,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's a tough read, but a good one that pays off by the end of it. So let's talk about the first single and the first song on the album. So Days of High Adventure. You got the title from Conan the Barbarian, is that
I
correct?
did, yeah, yeah.
So he
The
says that somewhere?
It's the opening monologue when I think it's his Archer uh describing like the early days and the creation of the Conan universe, and just he does it in this great kind of gravelly delivery, and it's it's just one of those like deliciously overacted scenes in like a fantasy movie where a guy is just like really going for it. And like, you know, if you were walking down the street and you met a man in modern society speaking like that, you'd be like, this is a crazy man. But
Yeah.
in a fantasy movie, it's just so, it just helps you get into character, you know, so good. And he says something about when the oceans drank Atlantis and the rise of the sons of Arius and all this great archaic language that just gets me so fired up as a fantasy nerd. And I love that he ends the speech about let me tell you about the days of high adventure, and then lightning strikes and Conan's forging his sword and slaying barbarian. I'm getting all fired up here just thinking about it. I thought it was a
We're getting a look at your acting skills. I
yeah,
this
exactly.
is gonna go in your demo reel to get some acting gigs.
I thought it was a great name for a rock song because it just like really gets you fired up and ready to go, you know?
Yeah, so it's kind of inspired by Edgar Winter's Frankenstein,
Mm.
or at least you kind of refer to the song as being in a similar vein. For we have some really young listeners. Like the last interview or two interviews ago, we had a 7-year-old that sent in a question. So there's some, if for those that don't know Edgar Winter and don't know the song Frankenstein, can you share what the comparison would be to Days of High Adventure?
First thing I would say was YouTube that song right now because it's awesome. But then that song is great. It's a weird, sprawling rock and roll masterpiece of it's all instrumental and it's just like a series of cool riffs paired together, a whole bunch of different instruments. Edgar Winter starts playing keyboards and then he rips saxophone and then he starts playing marimba or something, or like timbales, I think. He's just like all over the place and it's such a weird song. It's called Frankenstein because they patched it together from a bunch of different songs. They just like stitched a bunch of riffs together to literally make a patchwork riff monster of a jam. And it's great. A song I've always loved just because it's bizarre and funky and rocking and super awesome. And I also love that it's a front man who plays a bunch of different instruments, kind of like myself, you know? So, yeah, and I also love that song was popular and people loved it despite the fact that it doesn't have a verse or a chorus or even any singing or a super bizarre structure. You know, it's just like it's embracing its weirdness, but it's still super cool. I don't know. I love that. I love the idea of writing a song that was like that, just a bunch of riffs in a row that didn't kind of make any sense, but was just cool and sweet. I don't know. Got me
Yep.
fired up.
I think the two most popular instrumental songs of all time, I think, are Frankenstein and Green Onions. I think those are the two
Nice.
most popular, or at least like biggest hits that were instrumental of all time, which is pretty cool. So as we keep going through the songs on the album, so we have 10 Feet Tall. And so if the video game, you're into video games, if the video game Guitar Hero came to you and requested just one song off of this Shamus album to add to the next Guitar Hero that people could play along to, what song would you choose? And I'm asking when we talk about 10 Feet Tall, because to me, with man, that fast tempo, the awesome guitar riffs, the crazy guitar solo, it'd be hard to beat. I mean, you could take almost any of the songs on this album because there's so many badass guitar riffs, but is there a song you would choose above 10 Feet Tall? What do you think?
That's probably the best candidate. Yeah. 10 Feet Tall is the most sort of has the closest to like a regular structure. Like it's got verse and chorus and you know it could stand alone as a regular pop song, but I thought it fits so well into this album of kind of like eccentric oddities because it kind of captured the energy of the wolf so well, you know, like it's a real just like I'm a wild force of nature, don't fuck with me kind of song, you know. Yeah, I could definitely have a little Guitar Hero energy in there, you know. Like the guitar solo on there was actually played by Jim Boskill.
Oh,
So
nice.
got that next level virtuosity that you know you can only get with a guy his caliber. So I had him come by the studio for a day and he played that solo and he played on a few other songs. So yeah, it's got the Guitar Hero flavor for sure.
So we were just talking about instrumental songs, so Green Onions and Frankenstein.
Yeah.
And on this album, so there's some instrumental songs like Giant, Overture, and Shepherd's Lament. Is that Lament is how you say it, right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So those three songs, I'm just curious as a musician, as a songwriter, how do you decide that these three songs should remain instrumental and not try to add vocals and lyrics? Like where does that line get stopped? You're like, no, this has to remain instrumental.
Well, that's a good point. I think something like Shepherd's Lament was I was really much going for a mood piece. Like I wasn't trying to have it be like a pop song or anything like that. It's just supposed to be this sad kind of yeah, evocative piece of music. Like there are vocalizations in that song. There's no lyrics. Like there's like sort of like Gregorian chanting, like oh, like that kind of thing. Um, yeah, I don't know. You easily could have put vocals on it, I suppose, but I think it just sort of the sometimes when you're trying to evoke a mood or an emotion, not having words in the song makes it easier, because as soon as there's lyrics, that's sort of what the human ear gravitates towards, and then it just puts everything in a different context. Whereas if something's instrumental, there's sort of a more vague energy to it, and I think you can kind of infer different emotions from it that way. Um, Giant was a piece that I just tried to write like an adventure theme. Like I was literally just trying to write like, you know, a metal-ish, metal kind of like
Yeah.
series of riffs, like, not far off of Frankenstein again kind of thing. And Overture was just like I was just envisioning like a fanfare when like a king walks into a room, something like that. So I guess there would be an element of like film scoring to some of this kind of stuff, like the idea that I'd be writing music for a movie that doesn't exist yet, kind of thing. Yeah, and I think just keeping it instrumental means that you kind of have a heightened emphasis on emotion and less on like the intellectual side of what the lyrics might mean.
So the song Giant, someone yells out Giant or something, don't they?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what's funny is as I'm listening and I'm like, oh, there's an instrumental, there's an instrumental. Then I'm like, am I allowed to include it in instrumental? Because there is one word, like someone yells out giant. I was like, oh, do I have to cross that off of the instrumental list?
I think a lot of those tunes, I'm sort of envisioning yeah, like a visual element to it. Like that song, literally imagining like a giant coming over the hillside and attacking a town, and you can like almost in like a Godzilla movie, you can hear the person go giant, like he's coming, kind of thing. Like uh, yeah, it goes back to that kind of film scoring for a film that doesn't exist idea. This idea of a giant emerging, attacking a town, and what would that sound like if you were writing the score to that in a movie? Like I think that's kind of where I was coming from when I was writing that. So.
So I have a background in audio engineering. So when I'm listening, it's like I'm really listening. And I thought that the album sounded incredible. So you got to give credit to the engineer that's doing the tracking, there's the mixing, there's the mastering. It sounds great. And also more on the production side of like the sounds and the creative decisions that are made. There's a ton of atmosphere to it. Like it's a thick, it's a weird word to describe an album, but there's like a very thick and dense sound, like you're stepping into another world, just like reading the Game of Thrones books with all the world building. You hear that
Oh, yeah.
sonically as well. And I have some words sent in here from someone that had something to do with how the album sounds. So this is from Dan Weston, who mastered the album. Dan
Yeah.
Weston says, he keeps it short and sweet. He says, Shamus. It actually has nothing to do with the album. He says, Shamus, I appreciate your warmth and candor while showing me how to play darts as I slowly lost consciousness recently. So that's from Dan Weston. What is he
Nice.
talking about here?
Well, Dan and I and some of the other guys who frequent Taurus Recording, where we made the record, we'll go bowling every few months and sometimes have a few drinks. And we were playing some darts last time, and yeah, it was good. You're welcome, Dan. Thanks for the kind words, buddy.
That's funny. So the Song of a Wolf, there's such an amazing groove between the bass, the guitar, and the drums. You
Yeah.
had mentioned the other two members that you basically grew up with them. You've known them for a long time. Is that correct?
Yeah.
With
Well,
Matt?
Soren, who plays bass, was like one of my best pals in high school. Played bass in my first ever band. He was the first guy to move to Toronto when I mentioned that my band was splitting up and guys were moving to Toronto, and I kind of followed suit. He was the guy who kind of led the charge. So a lot of musical memories with him, and it was great to reconnect and make and work on this record together. And yeah, Matt Worry Smith, the drummer, was a guy I met in Toronto. Who, similarly shared a lot of tastes in music and fantasy and stuff like that. And we actually started playing D&D together. And he's the dungeon master of my D&D campaign, so I thought it'd be a natural fit to get him involved in a fantasy rock project. And he brings so much good, positive, creative energy and just sort of like wildness that I thought he would be a great. Like I love the idea of casting him as the wolf. Like if I'm the shepherd, he would be the wolf, and then we kind of like vibe off of each other's energy in that regard.
And then does that mean Soren is the giant?
Thorin is the giant, yes, to complete the trilogy there.
The holy trifecta. So
Yes, exactly.
I was able to infiltrate the Shamus camp, and I have some kind words sent in from both of those guys,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
uh, they must like you because they each wrote quite a bit. So here we go. I'm going to do my best to read through these. So it's pronounced Soren.
Soren, yeah.
Soren. Okay. So Soren, who plays bass, says Seamus is a great friend and one of the most authentic and musically talented people I know. Even through all of his success and achievements, he has remained the same genuine friend that he was when we met back in high school. I think that says a lot about his character. His talents on multiple instruments, great ears, and a natural instinct for writing catchy hooks and riffs makes him musically unstoppable. Seamus has always had a strong artistic vision, and it's incredible to see that continue to grow and evolve over the years. I can't wait to hear what's next. So that's from Soren.
Oh,
And
nice.
then and then right under the wire, I had to write this out by hand because I had already printed my question. So this came in right before we hopped on here. Matt sent this in. He says, I'll see if I can read my own writing. It's not good. Seamus is not only a bandmate, but also a buddy, a pal, and dare I say, friend. It's been one of the great privileges of my life to be included in any of his musical projects. Easy to be around, always authentically himself, talented, fun, and just a great hang. I love that guy. That's from Matt.
Oh, oh, you're killing me with these kind words here, man. I'm getting to get all misty
We got the
here.
whole power trio, the holy trifecta that's tied in here.
That's wonderful. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that. That's awesome.
So as we wrap up talking about the album here, so you made a music video for the song "The Big Dog," and
Yeah.
you see a showdown between the shepherd and the wolf. Can you just talk about the music video a little bit? We'll get our listeners to go to YouTube and give it a watch.
Yeah. Well, basically, it was Rob Fidel, who's a buddy of ours that we met through our visual art guru, Matt Dunlap. He's a LA guy who's just got this wonderful animation style that's so quirky and charming and idiosyncratic. And he actually did the music video for a theme from Bros, which was amazing. He's done work for the Sheepdogs in the past. His animation style is so kind of like fun and wild and kind of unhinged that I really like it. And he's just a great dude too. So I reached out to him, and he loved the concept of the album and the vibe of it. And I just said, like, just give me like a showdown piece of the shepherd and the wolf, like they're meeting in the meadow at midnight, and they're going to do battle. And he just like took it and ran with it and came up with this weird and wild video that I just love so much. So I thought it was a great thing to include. And also just any kind of, I'm such an animation freak. Like I love, my favorite show growing up was The Simpsons, so I loved animated stuff. So just to get an animated version of this story that I've created, I was pretty thrilled. So it's cool.
So I'm going to throw something out here and let me know if I am completely wrong with this statement. So when listening to the song, there's this epic organ solo that pans left and right. And let me know if I'm completely crazy. So as I'm listening to this, I can picture like a battlefield, like picture Braveheart, like left to right,
Yeah,
and you have the two sides. And I'm picturing like the shepherd on one side, the wolf on the other side. And it's like the organ solo on the left is like the shepherd coming to battle, and then it goes to the right, and it's the wolf coming in, and they're all coming in. Does that make any sense, or was I on drugs while
absolutely,
listening?
dude. I mean, hopefully both, but yeah, yeah, man, that's totally it. Like, I love the idea of like, dueling instrumental solos. I think it's such a great idea. When you've got high octane rock and roll music with lots of high energy and guys really going for it, playing, you know, Like there's almost like a battle quality to it, and like and the idea of dueling melodies and dueling ideas, and then when you can hard pan them in the studio like that, so it literally sounds like they're running at each other. Like, yeah, I love that. I love that kind of evocative feel. So you're right on the mark, man. That's great.
The artwork is amazing. I mean, I haven't seen the whole thing because I'm not physically holding it,
Yeah.
but the cover artwork is incredible. What can you say about the cover?
So that's Arthur Doyle, who plays in a wicked band called Tupperware Remix Party. He's a great drummer, but he's also a really great visual artist who, again, just got the concept of it right away. He's like, you want like a bad 70s paperback cover, right? And I was like, yes, absolutely. So I just kind of gave him the kind of like mythos of the world that I created. I was like, here's sort of the idea, Shepherd, Wolf, fantasy universe, Roger Dean, that kind of thing. Frank Frazetta, Boris Vallejo. And he just took it and ran with it and just came up with this awesome sci-fi fantasy cover that was just absolutely perfect. I loved it. So can't say enough good things about him.
So I have the final quote of the interview from Arthur Doyle himself. So
All
he
right.
keeps it short and sweet. He says, Shamus is super nice and a very talented dude. There you go from Arthur.
Thanks,
Just a little,
Arthur.
just dangled a few little kind words, which is more kind words than we normally hear every day. So
Oh, that's nice. Make me feel good.
So I have one final statement about this album. I'm about to make a bold statement. Do you think you can handle the boldness that's about
I'll
to come?
try. I'll try my best.
So every Friday when new albums come out, I mean, there's usually, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 new albums that come out every Friday. I check the list. I add all the albums to Spotify. I listen to almost every new album released every year. I'm just a big music nerd. And
Nice.
I am going to make a bold statement. I believe this is in the top 5 best albums released so far in 2023. And I've listened to almost everything. So I have in my top 5, I have 4 albums, I believe, so far, like in the runner for album of the year. So I have albums from Boy Genius, Half Moon Run, Katie Tupper, and you. That's what I got, man. So I'm not
Oh, that's good
it,
company to be
yeah,
in.
it's some high praise. So for our listeners, if you made it this far, go check out the album. It's on all the streaming platforms. It's available on vinyl as well. I believe it is totally worth your time, and maybe that's the best review someone can get. It's an album of the year contender for me.
Worth
So
your time. Wow. Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate that. A lot of love went into making the record. And yeah, please check it out if you want to. And that's wonderful, man. Thank you.
I have a hypothetical question for you. Uh, let's let's go into the future. I'm talking 100 years, 500 years, 1,000 years from now. Most of today's music has dissipated. It's been erased from human consciousness. However, there's still one Sheepdog song around, there's still one Bros song around, and there's still one Shamus song around that people are still listening to. If you could choose one song from each project to represent each of those projects, what song would you choose? So it doesn't have to be the most known song or the biggest single, but just to you, what would you keep around 1,000 years from now to represent you essentially in those 3 different projects? This is a tough question, man. The hard ones are at the end of the interview.
Yeah. You're backloaded in here. Well, I think for Bros, I'd have to go with Tell Me because that's just such a juggernaut of a song and it's just brought so much good notoriety to that project. It's the song that everyone knows from that band. And it's just also a great, fun, super song to play live. Uh, for Seamus, I probably go maybe Days of High Adventure because it kind of just encapsulates what that project's all about. It's a long, sprawling, riff-based, nerdy jam kind of thing. It's got a bridge that really takes it into a different level, and it's got I don't know, just a good kind of crest and general arc to it. For Sheepdogs, oh, that's a tough one.
There's so many albums, so many songs, so many
No,
hit
it's
singles. What do you
been
choose?
a long, strange trip. Yeah. You know what? Maybe one of my favorite songs to play live, and one that I think really encapsulates the whole spirit of that band is "I'm Gonna Be Myself." Um, just because it's just got such a great anthemic quality to it. Uh, Positive, self-affirming message, which is sort of what I think of kind of what rock and roll is really all about. Really fun to play live. People always go nuts when we play it. We always have a big breakdown in the middle lately. Ewan's been referencing some Allman Brothers licks in there, which always get people going. It's sort of a summer staple. Yeah, and I just love the sentiment of that song. It's just a great, affirming, anthemic, fuck yeah kind of a song. So I'll go with that. I'm gonna be myself.
Those are good choices. I have two final questions. When you look back on your life and career, what are you most proud of, and what are you most grateful for?
I'm just grateful to still be here, still be doing what I'm doing. To have an audience of people who are into what I do is amazing, and I'm so grateful for that. Ooh, what am I proud of? I guess that I stuck with it. They kind of go hand in hand. I mean, I've had the opportunity to do what I do, which is amazing, but also the fact that I've been able to take that opportunity and run with it and work at this and get better at it, or hopefully get better at it, and that discipline, I think, to work. I think a lot of people who achieve success, especially in music, can kind of let it go to their heads and maybe can kind of fritter away some opportunities. I think the fact that we've had a pretty long career and hopefully continue to have a long career uh, is a testament to our willingness to work hard and the discipline to not take any of this for granted and work and continue to make good music, hopefully.
I thought for a second you were going to say most proud of having your own theme song. So
Well, of course, that yeah, that
that's
goes without
amazing.
saying. Yeah.
You're just used to having your own theme song. It's not
Yeah.
a big deal anymore. Once you have your own theme song, it is what it is.
Hey.
That's funny. So final question. Uh, if you could go back in time and you could sit down next to your 10-year-old self and you could take all the years of living since then, all the mentorship and lessons and experience and highs and lows, what words of advice do you whisper to cute little Shamus that's sitting there to help guide him through this human adventure, this human existence?
Probably tell him to get some guitar lessons. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like, I'm lucky enough to have led a life without any huge glaring missteps. I think, something like, don't turn left at the intersection on June 6th, 1995 or anything like that. Something like that I can think of. But I don't know. I think just sort of keep up the hard work and don't get discouraged. There's plenty of times in life where I've gotten discouraged, but I've been lucky enough to have windfalls or good positive role models or people come along and help me and keep my chin to the grindstone kind of thing. So I'd probably just say something like that, just sort of like stay the course, don't get discouraged, keep working. Good things will happen. Sometimes you got to be lucky, but you got to be good to get lucky too, right? So
Where can our listeners find each of your three projects online? So websites or social media, where do they go? I'll put a link in the description, but for
yeah,
those just listening,
I mean, you can find us on any of the streamers, sheepdogs.com. I think, oh God, I should know. I think it's shamusmusic.com, but again, you can find it
just
on,
Google.
yeah, Google it. We're on, you can find us on Instagram and stuff too. Same with Bros. Yeah, check us out. Lots of music to sink your teeth into if you're into it. Yeah.
And is there anything you'd like to say to the fans that have supported you all the way from the beginning?
Just thanks. Appreciate the listens, appreciate the spins. We'll keep making the music if you keep listening to it.
So as we wrap up, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you for your lifelong pursuit of mastery as a musician, as a singer-songwriter. I want to thank you for being a great ambassador for Saskatchewan. I mentioned to you that that's where my
Yeah,
family is originally from. So you put Saskatchewan on the map and you make everyone proud that's from there. I
I'm flying
want
every show.
you have a flag, you said?
Yeah, we tape it to the organ that I play for most shows that we've played. So we fly it at every show. I feel
That's
like a
all.
lot of people don't even know what it is for the most part, but
That's all good. Now they know to look for it. I want to
Yeah.
thank you for putting out great music with all three projects. I have songs from the Sheepdogs. I have songs from Bros on my great songs playlist on Spotify that I'm playing every day. And now I have the Shamus album on my list of great albums from 2023. So thank you for putting out such great music that is worth listening to. That's become the soundtrack to the lives of many people around the world. I want to thank you for providing quotes for Lowell Campbell and for the Dreamboats. You help make the podcast better by being a part of it. And last but not least, I want to thank you for this interview as a fan of your music, for sitting down with me for the last 2+ hours, answering all my ridiculous questions, things I wanted to know the answers to for a long time. So, Shamus, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Joel, it's my pleasure. Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So, to our listeners, to the Shamus fans, to the Sheepdogs fans, to the Bros fans, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. If you've enjoyed today's episode of the podcast, please take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, and share. What I want to know is, who would you like me to sit down with next for a 2-hour deep dive interview? You can let me know by reaching out to me on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Joel Martin Mastery. Joel is Joel. And you can find me on Twitter and Snapchat at Joel Mastery. So I am done. I am complete. I approve this message, and I'll see you on the next episode.